"Hello, I'm here for the interview," Caroline said, opening the door. "Come in already," came a disgruntled voice in reply. Vivian, the head of HR, dressed smartly, looked arrogantly at the newcomer, then nodded at the vacant chair. She was immediately uncomfortable in it, wanting to leave. But by an effort of will, Caroline overcame the feeling. She had to remember the purpose of her visit. "So, why should we hire you specifically?" "I honestly don't know. This is my first interview. What's the customary thing to say in such cases?" Caroline shrugged embarrassedly. She tried to diffuse the oppressive atmosphere with a joke, but only elicited another annihilating glare from her interlocutor. Vivian was clearly not happy to see her. She didn't smile back, continuing to glare at her face. Caroline felt completely naked and uncomfortable, as if she were under real interrogation. "Why do we need you?" repeated the personnel supervisor with pressure. "No work experience whatsoever. Zero use as a specialist, like milk from a goat. Do you think trading firms recruit such employees?" "Why do you say that?" Caroline said quietly. Her cheeks immediately flamed. The unfair words of her interlocutor had struck a nerve. Caroline was not at all accustomed to open insults, but she had to keep her temper in check to get the job. "I study at the university by correspondence. Graduated from school with a gold medal. So you do not need to talk to me like some tramp," said Carolina after a deep exhalation. Honestly, she was very scared. She could barely contain her trembling. Tears came to her eyes. She wanted to just get up and run out of the office. But the cold greeting could prove to be a stress test, so she wanted to go all the way, but without insolence. "In my office, I'll talk however I want, got it?" Vivian said indignantly. "And there's no need to poke me, please. Get out of here, you bore. You'll never get a job in our company." Caroline flinched at the angry cry. A couple of tears rolled down her cheek, showing her fear. She immediately felt as if she was back in the company of the school bullies who were bullying the weak, unable to defend themselves with impunity. "What's that noise?" A man's voice suddenly sounded. Caroline instinctively turned round, seeing a young man in an expensive suit enter, attractive, confident, stylish. After looking at her and smiling reassuringly, he walked over to a desk in the corner, on which several colorful folders lay. "Hello, Charles," Vivian muttered. "Here I am interviewing, but the candidate isn't a good fit, so he's already leaving us." "Why not suitable?" he asked, pensively going through the paperwork. "For a company with such a long history." "Vivian, leave the pathos out of it," Charles grumbled. "I just recently bought the business, and I won it at auction for a penny, because a month ago you were completely bankrupt. But no buts." "No buts," the young businessman interrupted the woman. "Why are you jumping on the girl from the doorstep? Let her work if she has the desire. We need motivated employees badly, especially cleaners." Charles set the paperwork aside and looked at Caroline carefully. Was it just her imagination, or was there a slight irony in his eyes? Why would he show such humanity? Caroline's heart sank uneasily. Her whole fate seemed to hang in the balance, for if she could not get a job, it would mean the end. "Our salary isn't very big. Budgets don't allow for reckoning." Charles shook his head. "But if you do a good job, I'll pay out of my own pocket as an incentive bonus. Officially, we're not doing very well at the moment." "Does that mean you're taking me on?" Caroline clarified in a trembling voice. "Of course. Vivienne will prepare the paperwork and you can start tomorrow. We really are understaffed." The guy picked up the required folder of documents, gave the personnel chief a stern look, and then left the office. "Give me your passport. I'll make a copy. Tomorrow you'll bring everything else on the list and sign the employment contract." Vivian said heartily, "Got the job, good for you. But don't think it means anything. This is me warning you right off the bat." "Hey, honor student. Going home," came the mocking voice of one of the managers, Miles. Caroline squeezed her head into her shoulders, trying to make a quick dash for the lift. It had been 3 weeks since she'd been on the unit for what seemed like an eternity. When she'd applied for a job here, she'd never imagined how such an attractive job would turn out. Going somewhere when the place isn't clean? the manager shouted after her again. Not true, I've cleaned it all up in there, Caroline tossed over her shoulder. Then, what's this? Miles defiantly raised his hand with a paper cup of coffee and poured the rest of the sweet slurry onto the floor. A nasty smile lit up his face. The rest of his colleagues immediately laughed vehemently as they looked at the confused cleaning lady. Let's get the mop in your teeth and get to work. You're leaving before us, he said, tossing the empty cup next to the sticky puddle. Caroline only sighed heavily. From the first day, the staff had disliked her, constantly making fun of her and mocking her. Such nasty things happened to her all the time, which made the girl feel like she was in a cage with poisonous spiders, ready to sting more painfully. Can I put my stuff here? She asked, nodding at the communal coat rack. Go ahead. Miles waved his hand generously, still amused by Caroline's confusion. She hung her bag on the hook, adjusted her coat right over it, and went to her den to get a mop. Already in 5 minutes, the cleaning was done. Nothing complicated, but the spoilt mood was gone. That's it. I'm done, she said timidly. Miles nodded irritably, who had found something better to do in the meantime. Caroline exhaled a sigh of relief, put on her coat, and slung her bag on her shoulder. It seemed heavier than usual, but she decided not to linger in the office until someone had another idea for a prank. Caroline didn't even bother calling the lift. She quickly ran down the fire escape. She often used it during work so she wouldn't run into the rest of the company. A couple of floors down and the exit of the building was already looming in front of her eyes. Wait a minute, came the guard's voice suddenly. What's wrong? Caroline almost groaned. My working day is already over. May I see your purse? Said the guard imperiously. The square-jawed man was wearing a black uniform. I didn't want to argue with such a man. Please, Caroline held out her bag fearfully. What's this? The guard raised his eyebrows, pulling out a cardboard folder into the light. I don't know. You don't know what's lying around? The guard's frown of skepticism and the incomprehensible fine made her shrink back. Cold sweat broke out on Caroline's forehead in a vain attempt to combat her anxiety. We received an anonymous report today that a member of staff was attempting to remove compromising documents from the building. Care to explain what that is? Shook a folder in the air at the security guard. But I really don't know. It's not mine, Caroline whispered hesitantly. Good. Then you'll have to explain yourself to Mr. Charles. Come with me. Explain everything, but be quick about it. You should be fired for this, the young businessman said thoughtfully as he looked at the seized printouts. I'm sorry. I don't understand how I got them, Caroline replied through tears. I don't even know what these are. They are confidential documents of our company. Financial statements, plans for future deals and stuff like that. Information that could easily be used against us by our competitors. Charles, I know it's not you, but someone planted them in my purse. We need to find out who. And fast, the guy said, drumming his fingers on the table. I'm going to get fired now, Caroline whispered. She suddenly felt how tired she was and how much pain she was in. Right now, that pain and fear was the most real. She wanted to curl up in a ball, to be alone in the big world, without mean colleagues and insidious intrigues. In the whole office, only next to Charles, she was somehow calm and good. And now, though unwittingly, she became an accomplice of evil intent. It was necessary to conceal her condition somehow. But Caroline was gripped by a fear of the future that stiffened her body and made more and more tears pour down her cheeks. No, we'll do a staff investigation. In the meantime, you'll have to be my eyes and ears. Why do you believe me? Caroline whispered in surprise. Maybe I'm just a good person and I sense others just as good, Charles winked. He got up from the table and walked over to the girl and ruffled her hair. Don't cry, it'll all work out. I've been through worse than this. The gesture might have seemed too familial, but for some reason it calmed Caroline, making her believe that everything would indeed be all right. I don't believe that cleaning lady took the papers, Charles shook his head. Then who did? Terrence, the head of security, an older, older military man who had decided to retire from the service, but had not been able to give up his favorite job completely, replied melancholically. He had joined the company as a security specialist. Terrence seemed to know everything, maybe even more than the owners themselves. At any rate, he had access to the most confidential and secret information and even tacitly attended meetings, controlling the behavior of Charles' partners. I'm telling you for sure, Caroline didn't come into my office that day. Who else has keys? Vivian, but why would she? Old scores. You were pretty hard on her when you first bought the firm. Vivian thought she was going to be your mentor, but she's still in HR. Ambition's kicking in. You think Vivian pulled all this off? Charles gritted his teeth. What's the use of guessing? Let's look through the cameras, Terrence shrugged. The head of security opened his laptop, fiddled with the keyboard, and brought up the desired image on the screen. How many other cameras don't I know about? The young businessman commented jokingly. Don't worry, it's all for the greater good. Look, there she is sneaking around. The footage did indeed show Vivienne in one of her colorful outfits. She looked round warily, then opened the office and slipped inside. A couple of minutes later, the head of HR was already running back out, clutching a familiar cardboard folder to her chest. There you go, what more proof do you need? Terrence grinned. It's so stupid to get caught. She just didn't know about the videotaping. Otherwise, she wouldn't have acted so boldly. All right, let's round everyone up. It's time for a show trial. By what right are you accusing me? Vivian was indignant. Everyone in the common room watched with interest as the new owner reprimanded her, with the rest of the HR staff nervously shuffling behind her. They still couldn't decide whose side to take, the young owner or the old boss. Because you didn't just steal important documents, you also tried to frame a good colleague, Charles said sternly. The assembled employees immediately looked angrily at Caroline, as if the whole row was entirely her fault. I've worked here for 10 years, Vivian shrieked. Great. Then a new job shouldn't be hard to find with that kind of experience, Charles grinned. Well, fuck you all. Vivian turned abruptly and strode away angrily, heels clacking. A few of her entourage followed, while the rest scattered around the office, trying not to draw attention to themselves. From their demeanor, Caroline could tell the new owner was clearly not a favorite with them. Thanks for sticking up for me, she said when everyone had dispersed. You're welcome, Charles smiled back. But be warned, a lot of people seem to have a grudge against you. These employees don't like upstarts and those to whom their superiors are more loyal than they are. I'm getting used to it, she sighed sadly. So what happens now? Nothing. Work as before. Caroline was indeed not amused. She had no intention of staging a coup or getting involved in a power struggle. All she wanted was to work quietly, to save up the right amount of money. And instead, intrigue, backstabbing, unpleasant looks. Tears involuntarily came to her eyes at the thought of her plight. Are you crying again? Charles smiled, holding out his handkerchief. It's just all kind of scary. Office wars aren't for me at all, she sobbed, wiping her face with the soft cloth. You certainly have nothing to fear. Executive, responsible, honest. I hold on to those, so I won't let you take offense. May I? Caroline asked, knocking on the office door. It's time to clean up. Ah, yes, come in, Charles perked up. She began wiping the floors, carefully moving the chairs around. How are you? The young businessman asked, looking away from the papers. All good, I guess, Caroline shrugged. It's been a fortnight since Vivian quit, and no one's even spat in my back once. Well, you see, things are getting better, Charles grinned at the joke. I'm having a problem. I can't figure out the calculations. Caroline put the mop aside and began dusting the table. Her gaze happened to fall on a spread of papers with numbers and formulas. Suddenly, she made a faint movement, as if about to grab them, and shrank back like a rabbit before it leapt. There's a mistake right there, she said suddenly, noticing an inaccuracy in the formula she had drawn up, which, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. No, I'm not angry, just surprised. Charles raised his eyebrows. The attention from her superior immediately made Caroline embarrassed. She took up the rag again, trying to move away from the table, but Charles rose from his chair and blocked her path. "Caroline, don't be shy. Show me what you noticed there," he asked, taking the cleaning equipment from her. "Oh, it's just a typo there. There's probably a 1 instead of a 0. And they moved the number wrong here," Caroline mumbled, pointing her finger to the right place. The young businessman thought of something in his mind, underlined it with a pen and corrected it, humming with satisfaction. "Who are you, beautiful fairy?" Charles muttered with a smile, looking at Caroline. It was evident that he was pleasantly surprised by her intelligence. She had seen such a reaction to her work more than once, so Caroline blushed with pleasure and lowered her eyes. "Just an ordinary girl from a poor family," she said. "Tell me about yourself," Charles asked suddenly. "Must know your employees." "Not much to tell. Never knew my father. Grew up with my mum. She's a saleswoman for me. She's seriously ill right now." The girl immediately grew sad. "What's wrong?" "My feet are bad. A typical professional illness of salesmen, varicose veins in a neglected form. She can hardly walk. She needs an operation, but there's no money for it." "Is that why you were so keen to join us, and why you're working so hard?" Charles guessed. "Yes, I really want to help her. I just have to. It's just the two of us, after all. You know, the only person she's related to." "I understand," Charles shook his head. "I wasn't born with a golden spoon in my mouth myself. I came to success only through hard work. Always worked as hard as I could, built up a startup capital. Then I bought this company on the cheap. I am raising it from its knees. But it's too early to talk about victory. The problems and debts are over the top." Caroline silently looked at Charles, experiencing a strange feeling of closeness, as if she had known this man all her life. Charles' eyes looked at her with hope and warmth. He had a surprisingly natural combination of firmness of character, responsibility for his decisions, and empathy. "When I hired you, I had no idea we'd develop such a friendship," the young businessman muttered. "Thought just a young, pretty girl. Liked her right away. So I offered her a job. You can't imagine what a blessing it is to work with someone you can trust." "You said yourself that I'm a good person," Caroline smiled. Lately they had indeed begun to communicate much more warmly. Mutual sympathy was growing every day, and she even sometimes wondered if they could have something serious. But she didn't dare to ask. God forbid we'll take offense. Then definitely the end of work. So Caroline tried hard to avoid misunderstandings in the conversation. Suddenly a phone call shattered the idyll. "Hello, darling," Charles said, taking the call. Embarrassed that she might overhear someone else's conversation, Caroline immediately gathered her things and quietly closed the office door. "Is Charles busy?" Betty's secretary asked, noticing her. "'Cause he's got some papers here for him to sign." On the phone, the gossip lover perked up. "Probably cooing and cooing again. Can't get enough of talking." Betty's secretary exhaled with a touch of envy in her voice. "Do you know if they're serious?" Caroline asked wistfully. "There's such a story there," the gossipy girl rambled, lowering her voice. "Rachel is his fiancée from a wealthy family. They're getting married. So Charles won't let any flings near her. He's in love with her. He'd do anything for her." The words of her friend made her feel sad. After all, the only man who treated her with such awe and tenderness was already taken. She even imagined how happy Charles must be now, and grinned sadly. "Yes, all the handsome and rich ones have been taken. We can't have that," Betty interpreted her sigh in her own way. "Is it about the money?" "You're in love, aren't you?" The secretary squinted slyly. "No, what makes you think that?" Caroline felt her cheeks flaming and immediately ran to her cubicle, keenly regretting having spoken so frankly to the office's chief chatterbox. So many conflicting feelings were mingled in her soul, and the only thing she wanted was some peace and quiet to think things over and decide for herself. "Hello," Caroline smiled as she saw Charles step out of the lift. "I was just coming into your office to tidy up." "Hi, come on in," the guy replied dryly. "It's been a while." It's like you've completely disappeared." It had been a month since their last conversation. All that time, she'd carefully avoided close contact, lest she let her liking turn into something serious. Unfortunately, she wasn't very good at that trick, and Caroline often had to fight the urge to hug Charles instead of cleaning. One time she had even almost given in to the provocation, but she caught herself immediately. "Is something wrong?" Caroline asked cautiously. "There's a serious problem brewing," Charles sighed. In fact, everyone in the office had noticed it. For a week now, the boss had been walking around gloomier than a cloud. Although before that he had always spoken positively and inspirationally on every issue. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Caroline asked cautiously. "My dear," exhaled Charles with a sort of sadness, "do you know what I liked you for from the first? Sincerity. I look at you and I can see it. Selfless worry, sincere. But there are some things no one can help you with." She frowned, but then decided she shouldn't take offense at his words. After all, Charles might simply not want to be frank with his cleaning lady. After all, who was she to pry into his soul? "I caught the bride with her best friend." Charles suddenly broke the silence. Can you imagine? The wedding was supposed to be in 6 months, and she... He took a packet of cigarettes out of his pocket, lit a cigarette, but immediately tossed the smoking cigarette butt aside. His fingers were trembling, giving away the pain of what had happened. Caroline wanted to take his hand to calm him down, but she felt uneasy herself. She could see the tension in his soul. Realizing this, she walked over to the desk, slid open a drawer, brushed an invisible speck off the tabletop, and sat down beside him. Rachel herself doesn't know what happiness she's missing out on. And you'll find a good, faithful one, and you'll definitely be happy, she said confidently, trying to cheer her friend up. "Oh, I hope so. There's so much on my plate. It's just that this breakup isn't convenient at all right now. These things never happen at the right time. See, it's even more complicated than that." The guy shook his head. "There's an important negotiation coming up. Wealthy investors from the capital are coming in. We've been discussing their contribution to our company for weeks now. And now they've decided to come in person, to take a look, to figure out how to help. I mean, you negotiate all the time. You just have to prepare well." "It's not just my preparation," Charles explained. "The meeting will be at a restaurant, an informal setting. It's imperative to be with families, or at least your other half, and I'm alone in every sense. But investors are people too. They must realize that things happen in life," Caroline encouraged him. "I don't know. I think it would reflect badly on his reputation. I mean, you didn't keep your fiancée, so where are you going to get your hands on our finances?" said the chief doubtfully. "I didn't know Rachel was going to cheat on me when I arranged the meeting. I promised the investors I'd introduce them to everyone. What am I supposed to do now? Make myself look like an idle chatterbox?" There was an oppressive silence in the office. Caroline didn't have a single clear idea that would help diffuse the atmosphere. The investors could really think that the young man was lying to them, and Charles was suffering from the betrayal of the woman he loved. All in all, it was all very sad. Fortunately, a saving thought seemed to have occurred to him. After a bit of thought, the young man, as if grasping at the last straw, "Why don't you come with me? There will be a party there, different people, good food. You'll just play the part of the bride, smile pretty, and we'll leave." "How do you imagine it, from a commoner to a queen?" Caroline asked confusedly. "Don't worry, no one will ever know. They are guests from the capital. They will never see you again in their lives." "But how will I look? I don't have the right clothes, and I don't have the right manners. I don't even have lipstick," said Caroline in astonishment. "Don't think about that. We'll dress you up without any trouble." "Well, at my expense, of course," Charles perked up. "You just have to agree. There doesn't seem to be anyone else to help me out. A pure adventure. Why did I go along with you?" Caroline grumbled, thumbing through the dress she'd bought. She was embarrassed by how much money Charles had spent on jewelry. She also suddenly thought that they would have to pretend to be a couple in love all evening. The fantasy made her blush again. Caroline bit her lip and turned away, feeling her ears turn pink. "Surprisingly, almost everything looks good on you," Charles said with a touch of admiration in his voice. "What do you mean surprising? Did you expect the dress to fit me like a cow's saddle?" His friend merrily teased him. "Just because I only come to work in jeans and then wear a dressing gown all day doesn't mean it's the same in life." "No, it doesn't. I just couldn't decide which one was best, so I took all of them." Caroline took another look at the 3 pairs of shoes, several handbags, and small boxes of accessories. It was hard to choose, for she had never seen such beauty in her life. Certainly not tried it on, despite her bravado. She really didn't allow herself much in the way of upgrades, saving all the money she could for the surgery. "Text Mum. We have to leave pretty soon." The boy spoilt the solemnity of the moment. Already an hour later, they found themselves on the doorstep of a posh restaurant. The obliging hostess showed them where they could leave their outerwear and be seated. "There you go. And you were worried," Charles whispered, pushing back a chair for her. "I still feel like they'll notice the catch," she replied quietly. But the important guests were too busy with their own affairs to pay attention to her. The men in luxurious suits shook hands, complimented the newly arrived ladies, and immediately began discussing financial matters. "What do you need us for anyway?" Caroline chuckled, nodding towards the table. Next to each guest sat similarly attired companions, differing from each other only in age and amount of jewelry. All of the women sat with an absent look, taking absolutely no part in the conversation. "Hard to explain," Charles shrugged his shoulders. "Are you like flowers? Beautiful, but silent. Hey, actually offensive." "Okay, it's a joke. It's just that we're expecting another important guest. Once Mr. Michael arrives, there'll be no time to be bored." The company of rich people sat for a while longer, and Charles joined in their chatter, while Caroline ordered herself a light salad. "How do you like our town?" she said, catching the eye of one of the girls. "It'll do," she replied indifferently, giving her only an arrogant glance. The attempt at familiarization had clearly failed. It seems that these divas were really used to being just decoration, not paying too much attention to the people around them. At last, "My friends, how hard it was to get to you," suddenly sounded a sonorous voice from the entrance of the restaurant. A respectable man of years, dressed in a blue suit with a white shirt and a discreet tie, headed towards the table. He walked briskly, holding an elegant crocodile leather briefcase in his hand. Fancy gold-rimmed glasses gave his face a touch of aristocracy. He glanced round the room and headed for the table where a group of rich men were seated. Mr. Michael looked to be about 50 years old. Reaching the table, he placed his briefcase on a vacant seat and, smiling brightly, turned to Caroline. "And this must be our Charles' lovely bride," the entrepreneur mumbled. "Hello, my name is," Caroline began, but immediately faltered when she saw Michael turn pale. "What's wrong with you?" "It just can't be," the man whispered with just his lips. "I just buried you." Caroline immediately pressed her lips together, not realizing what was happening. The important delegate swayed with excitement and nearly fainted, but grabbed the back of his chair, remaining standing. He pulled himself together and quickly pretended as if everything was all right. Caroline noticed what a strange way Michael had of smiling, like a grimace of pain on his face. The man looked so confused, as if he had gotten himself into the stupidest situation. "You're my daughter. How is that possible?" Michael gave out confused, grabbing his chest with his left hand. "I'm sorry, Mr. Michael. You said Joyce died 6 months ago in a road accident," Charles interjected. "Yes, that's correct. But this girl is an exact replica of my daughter," the businessman exhaled, not taking his eyes off Caroline. She felt herself starting to get embarrassed again. Caroline looked confusedly towards Charles, seeking his support, then shifted her gaze to the businessman. She had felt like the black sheep at this event before. And here she had the attention all to herself. "Mr. Michael, there's no way Caroline is your daughter. She's lived in this town all her life with her mom. We met by chance," Charles said, not bothering to specify that she worked for his company as a cleaner. "They just look so much alike." "Coincidence, I guess," the man shook his head. "Honestly, it's like seeing a ghost." "Let's maybe get to the main discussion," one of the businessmen spoke up. The assembled men became animated. Someone pulled out papers. Electronic tablets with calculations appeared on the table. Michael joined the fuss, too, snapping the clasp of his briefcase shut. But his eyes kept looking at Caroline. For the rest of the evening, he literally never left her side, half listening to his colleagues' conversations. "I'm sorry, it's embarrassing. I'm distracting you from important business." Caroline finally couldn't stand it. "Can I go home? So I don't get in the way." No, what are you doing?" Michael waved his hands. The colleagues glanced at them unhappily, but said nothing aloud. The main questions had been settled, and now it remained to get a concrete answer from the chief guest. "I am still certain of our kinship. Coincidences like that just don't happen." Michael continued to bend his line. "You and Joyce don't just look alike, like you're the same person." "Even so, how do we find out the truth?" Caroline shrugged. "Very simple. A DNA test." Michael exhaled excitedly. "That's really expensive." Don't worry, I'll pay for it. And anyway, I'm so tactless I came here without a present." Michael dug into his wallet and pulled out a bank card. "Here. This will buy you something for the first time." "No need, thanks," Caroline replied firmly. Take it. I insist." "What makes you so sure we're related?" Caroline asked in a trembling voice. She was terribly uncomfortable with the whole situation, and even more so accepting money from a stranger on incomprehensible terms. "I'm sorry. I'm probably rushing things too much," Mr. Michael interjected. "It just seems like a miracle to meet by chance like this. I mean, look at you two, you look exactly alike." Michael opened the wallet again and showed the photograph enclosed in the special compartment. The picture of Caroline did indeed look like an exact replica of her, with the same dark hair, brown eyes, and delicate facial features. "You also have a mole under your right knee. Allergic to strawberries," Mr. Michael spoke again, leaning over to her as if not noticing his colleagues. "And dimples on your chin, just like Joyce's. I think you're twins." "How is that possible?" Caroline was taken aback. Michael wasn't wrong about any of the above, and coupled with the photograph, his words seemed so convincing that she wanted to believe them. All her life she'd wondered why her mom didn't talk about her father, and now the family might be reunited, even if it happened in such a strange way. "We'll figure it out. Daughter, you most importantly trust me," Michael smiled warmly. "Okay, I believe you," Caroline supported the smile. "So, shall we open it?" Michael asked, clutching the envelope with the test results in his fingers. He had purposely stayed in town for a week to get the necessary expertise done. The company of three was now sitting in Charles' office, who continued to give the illusion that they were about to be married. "Come on," Caroline nodded, wincing inwardly with impatience. Michael carefully opened the envelope, then extracted a folded and half inspection sheet into the light. "So, the material content is wrong. Blood type wrong too," Michael coughed nervously, running his eyes over the lines, then stared at the girl incomprehensibly. "The result is negative." "What? How so?" Caroline and Charles cried out in one voice, shocked by the news. In this short week, everyone had grown accustomed to the idea of her being related to Michael. "A mistake, I suppose." "It happens," Michael explained confusingly, loosening his tie. "I specifically ordered a second one just to be sure." He pulled another envelope out of his briefcase, ripped off the stamp with trembling fingers, and began to read the letterhead. "What?" Caroline asked quietly, burning with impatience. "The result is negative," Michael voiced in a slumped voice. "You're not my daughter after all. The mistake has been ruled out." "So what do we do now?" Charles intervened in their conversation. "I don't know," the man shrugged, just lost in speculation. "I guess our investigation has reached a dead end," Caroline said sadly. All three were silent, each thinking about something different. Caroline felt the hope she had cherished with such trepidation crumble. Michael had seemed to her a good man, and to find a father in his person would be a sign to her that everything would be all right. But now that everything was ruined, Caroline felt her disappointment poisoning her soul with a new attack of longing. "There's only one thing left to do," the investor said cautiously, To ask your mother. No, we mustn't alarm her. Caroline immediately perked up. Mum's ill. Worrying would not do her any good at all. We have no other choice, or we'll never know the truth. Then I'll do it myself. I don't think she's ready to meet all of you. I'll stop by the house and ask her casually. But I'll drive you, Michael said flatly. I'll come with you too. I'll make sure no one does anything stupid, Charles cut in. All three of them nodded in agreement. In a silent procession, they walked downstairs and then loaded into the respectable and expensive car of a metropolitan businessman. Hello. Caroline said hello to her mother as she went up to the flat. Hello, my good girl. You're early today, Mrs. Melissa smiled. How are you feeling? Better. The rest is doing me good after all. It's just a shame you have to work for the two of us, the woman sighed sadly, finding herself less than thrilled with the situation. Caroline bit her lip nervously, not knowing how to approach the troubling topic. Is something wrong? Are you looking a bit disheveled? Mum remarked. Look, you just don't worry. But I need to find out about my father. Mrs. Melissa immediately frowned, suspecting something amiss. Mum, you just don't worry. Tell me honestly it's for work. We're being checked by security there. It was a small lie told for the good, and Caroline knew it wasn't the most pleasant topic, and tried to bring her mother as gently as possible into the difficult conversation. All right, Mrs. Melissa gave in. After all, you're an adult. You'll find out for yourself sooner or later. I mean, you're my nearest and dearest, but I adopted you from an orphanage when you were just a baby. And my birth parents. Do you know anything about them? Caroline asked cautiously. Mum frowned. You were just a baby. And an unusual one at that. You were dropped off at the door of the orphanage at night. Not even the staff saw who did it. But there must be some record of it. Not really. Some friends of mine worked at that orphanage. They informed me that there was a new girl. I was just thinking about taking someone in. And here you are, she hasn't lived in the orphanage for a day, and she's just a little girl. The director helped me get the paperwork done quickly, without too many delays, so no one really knew where you came from. Then you have no information about me? Caroline asked, with difficulty restraining the tremor in her voice. I'm sorry, love. I didn't need it. You were mine straight away, and we didn't need anyone else at all. Mrs. Melissa shook her head. Caroline walked over to her mother and hugged her. The woman smiled, pulling her daughter close to her. Thank you for always being there for me, Caroline whispered. It's okay, daughter, it's okay. That's the way it is, Carolina said as she returned to the car, talking to her mum. She referred to an urgent matter and ran off, barely holding back tears. The news that her mum wasn't her own wasn't so easy. The girl almost burst into tears in the entrance, and only the presence of strangers did not let Caroline completely sour. But could Charles and Michael really be considered outsiders now? Amazing story, Michael shook his head. And a strange one. Too many white spots. You absolutely have to be connected to Joyce, right? Except how? Perhaps you need to talk to your wife. Perhaps that's the only lead left, Charles said thoughtfully. He was so engrossed in the investigation that he had completely forgotten about the recent breakup. Moreover, his constant intercourse with Caroline made him look at the girl in a new way, and took a kind of sympathy with her. You're right. I'll fly home immediately. It'll be quicker than traveling by car. I really can't wait to figure things out, Michael said. They drove to the airport where they were about to load for a flight to the capital. Keep an eye on my car for now and my daughter, Charles' senior colleague admonished. When you get back, I'll pick up both the girl and the car, Charles joked jealously. We'll see. Michael shook his head cryptically. He headed towards the boarding point, waving goodbye to the young ones. Caroline involuntarily clung to her companion, feeling vaguely uneasy. Her heart clenched uneasily, and her soul was filled with incomprehensible fear. Everything that was dear to her turned out to be untrue, and everything that might happen in the future was hidden in a dense fog of uncertainty. Don't be afraid. Everything will be all right. The important thing is that we're together, Charles said quietly. Feeling her trembling, he smiled and pulled her close to him, as if he wanted to protect her from everything in the world. "Do you have anything to say?" Michael said with pressure, finishing his story. His wife Sharon squirmed in her chair, not daring to look up at her spouse. The revelation was too sudden, and her husband looked too worried. "You see, it just so happens." "How? How did it turn out, Sharon?" exploded the businessman. From the first glance at his wife, he realized that she was hiding something important from him. The woman sobbed. Her gaze finally met his. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "It was so long ago. And if you don't tell me everything now, you'll never see me again," her spouse growled. "I got my ex-fiancée pregnant," Sharon whispered, ashamed of what she had done. "What, you? You were just on a business trip. I've been traveling abroad making some startup capital, and you were having affairs here while I was working there. Well, don't be angry, please. I was just lonely. It started out as a casual game of fun, light flirting, talking and going out in the evenings. And then things got so wrapped up, we've only been out once." "You're such a..." Michael said bitterly. "I did everything for you, and you stabbed me in the back. It was a mistake. I was young. My feelings got the best of me. I couldn't help myself. We broke up right afterwards and never saw each other again. I swear." "Then you got pregnant." "Yes," Sharon shamefully ducked her eyes, feeling the distaste her spouse was looking at her with. "Forgive me if you can," she whispered. Michael took a couple of steps toward her, then turned and stood frozen in place, staring blankly out the dark window. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, emotions, words, a series of swear words, one worse than the other. The man who had been ready to tear the woman who had insulted him to pieces suddenly burst into tears like a child. Sharon realized what was going on. The memories of the dead daughter they both loved more than anything else in the world were too fresh. There were two of them, two girls. "I knew as soon as I found out at the ultrasound that I was going to give one to the orphanage. You just couldn't handle twins. The business was just starting to develop, and I was so ashamed. I felt guilty that you'd be raising two other people's children, so I gave birth to twins. You'd just gone to Turkey to pick up another shipment of stuff." Sharon tried to approach her husband and put her hands on his shoulders, but he only waved her away, as if even the touch of a traitor was unpleasant to him now. The sobs subsided, and Michael pulled himself together, rubbing the hot moisture from his face. It was shameful for two people. It was okay to leave one behind. "I don't understand the logic, for the life of me," the man said. "You knew I was pregnant. There was no other way out, only to fake a miscarriage. But it would have been even worse for you then." What a touching concern. "I was thinking of you and..." She was thinking. "Don't you dare impose guilt on me after all that's happened." Michael immediately snapped at his wife. Sharon snickered, realizing she no longer had any voice. "Tell me what happened next," Michael said bitterly. "I gave birth at a private clinic, but as I planned, I only kept one baby girl, gave the other to an orphanage. Far away went to another city so that no one would ever find the ends. But you see how it turned out." Michael sat down at the table, lost, clenching his fists impotently. "I'm just in shock. Jesus. The man I loved for so many years ended up cheating me so meanly." Exhaled. His eyes had long since dried up. There was no room left in his soul for tears. All that raged in Michael's mind now was anger, quiet but merciless, sweeping away everything in its path. "Look, I'm guilty. I repent. It's a sin I'll never be able to wash away from you. That's understandable. But think about it, we both loved Joyce. What a bright kid she was. And it's all because of your upbringing. The girl loved you more than life itself. So maybe not by blood, but you were definitely related. That doesn't excuse you." "Of course it doesn't. I just want your memory of her not to be tainted by bad thoughts. It's only my fault." Michael thrashed against the back of his chair, staring blankly at the ceiling. For a second he thought that his beloved daughter was standing behind him, whispering something soothing. "Because of you, I could have lost her forever. It's just a gift of fate that I met Caroline and can get to know her properly. Second chances don't come along very often. And that's the only reason I'm going to let you leave with dignity." You're leaving me, Sharon squirmed. I don't. Right now I can't even see you after everything. It takes a while to get used to the thought. Honey, it's not like we're as young as we used to be. Think maybe there's something we can do to make things right? Sharon lowered her arms. She was a wreck, not at all sure how to proceed. The truth that had been revealed had turned her life upside down. There was nowhere else to go. Her husband said nothing more, not even looking at his wife. I need to leave. Michael reluctantly broke the silence. Where to? He got up from his chair and headed for the exit, not even lingering to pack his things. It's even amazing how clever you are at negotiating. Charles shook his head as he received another set of papers from Michael. A matter of experience. You've been in the business as long as you have. You'll start cracking like peanuts, Michael winked. I hope so. How are you all doing? Charles tried to ask the question as if in passing, but he couldn't completely hide his curiosity. Things are good, Michael grinned. You know, it's not like she's from someone else, but I still think of her as my daughter. It's just impossible not to love her. Do you really want to marry her, by the way? Well, it's a little complicated, Charles mumbled, cornered by the sudden question. It's not complicated at all, Michael said disapprovingly. You see, I'm not entirely sure she's ready for a relationship with me. I mean, I'd love to, but I don't know how she'd react. Ah, young people, you love to complicate things in these matters. The investor shook his head. Just talk to her honestly, openly. Then you won't have to guess and doubt. And what if I'm wrong? Will she want to be friends with me further, knowing that a friend expects more? Either way, you don't know the truth until you take a chance. And so both of you are tormented by the unknown. Can't you see the way she looks at you? Michael grinned. What do you mean? What do you mean? Charles was immediately alert. Even his heart began to beat faster. The boy drummed his fingers excitedly, completely caught up in joyous anticipation. It could be that Caroline had feelings for him too. A sudden knock on the door made the young businessman flinch. A couple of seconds later, the click of the lock was heard and Caroline entered the room. Remember the sun, here comes the ray. Michael smiled. Were you talking about me? Caroline raised an eyebrow. Yes, but our supervisor. Is something wrong? Charles hurried to interrupt his older colleague. Caroline gave both of them a suspicious look, but decided not to pay much attention to the men's strange behavior for the time being. Here's a list of people who are dragging the company down, she said, placing the sheet on the table. From where? Michael wondered, running his eyes over the column of names. Can I tell you? Caroline asked the young businessman, unsure of how best to proceed. He only nodded, looking down at the floor in embarrassment. After his recent conversation with Michael, it was as if he was afraid to look at her and not find the same look. You'll have to excuse us, Michael. We tricked you at that dinner party. I was only posing as Charles' fiancé to save his reputation. I'm actually working here as a cleaner. I'm in every office, so I did my little investigation while no one was paying attention to the servants. Such a valuable man and a cleaner. A flaw, Charles, a flaw. We've given your firm enough money. Now it's time to put the right people in the right places. We just didn't have management positions back then, the guy smiled. We do now, the investor waved the sheet. Look how many will be vacated soon. Don't you think Carolina has a good university? I checked. Oh, and she didn't slack off in school, unlike some people. And we also need to have an audit done so we have something to fire her for. Why are you looking at me like that? She wondered. Caroline, would you like to be Charles' real bride? Michael suddenly asked. She immediately blushed. Her cheeks flushed, and even the tips of her ears flamed with surprise. She had had feelings for the young boss for a long time, but because of her own modesty, Caroline had never hinted at it. It's all clear to you, Michael grinned. In short, lovebirds, love and advice. I'm giving you my blessing as your father, or you'll be around and around until you're old. As I was saying, the auditors who were called in found that our debts are not created out of thin air, Charles said. No one ever doubted my competence, Caroline answered him proudly. They laughed. Charles then put his arms around his beloved and kissed her firmly right on the lips. For the new employees, I've already organized interviews. In general, we'll have almost all of the locations covered. Processes shouldn't be affected. Good. At least Michael has secured enough funds for us to offer competitive salaries. Charles nodded. Don't forget my salary. I didn't go to work as your assistant for free, Caroline reminded him with a laugh. To think, when I bought this firm, I thought it would take years to deal with the debts. But here's the beauty. It's only been 6 months, and we're already standing on our feet. Good for you, you've paid off all your debts and prospered. It's certainly better than it was under Vivian's reign. Oh, don't say that name or you'll bring the devil to mind. Caroline laughed carefree again, snuggling up to her fiancé. Her laughter awakened tenderness in Charles' heart, and a wave of pleasure traveled through his body. They kissed again, this time more passionately. Here I see you're in the middle of your workday, came Michael's voice as he entered the office. Well-mannered people knock first, Charles muttered, unhappy at being interrupted. You should be working, not thinking about silly things. Evenings and weekends are for romantic dates, Michael admonished. I'm going home tonight. Mom needs a visit, Caroline replied. How is she? Will you let us pay for her operation? Michael immediately perked up. No need. I've already saved up for it myself. It's okay. She's doing great. She's on the mend. At least send her to a resort, the investor persisted. Thank you. Charles has already taken care of it. He just bought her a trip to a sanatorium. She'll be as good as new when she's rehabilitated. Well, I can't even help you, Michael frowned unhappily. It's like I'm passing your lives by. Don't worry, you'll have more trouble soon, Caroline smiled enigmatically. I'm at a loss to guess. Michael spread his hands. Caroline wants to ask you to help us with the wedding arrangements. Charles informed her lover with a squeeze. I recently proposed to her. All that's left is to sort out the formalities. What formalities? Michael smiled. They're not formalities, Caroline's eyes sparkled. This is the happiest day of our lives. We have it every day. It's all about loving each other. And the ceremony is just an entourage for the guests. That's true, Michael nodded. But it still needs to be celebrated. Well, that's what we're asking you to help us do, to pass on the generational experience, Charles cheered. What are we talking about? Of course we'll organize such a celebration. The whole town will be surprised. Caroline smiled contentedly, and then embraced the two men who had become really close and dear to her. It was with them that she wanted to share her new, bright life, in which no more gloomy days were expected. Leaf fall. How Melissa loved it. The wind swirls over the ground, and then yellow and red leaves carpet the autumn ground with color. There's silence all around. Only the rustle of leaves stirs the ear. It is still warm in summer. The sun is shining brightly. Gentle puffy clouds are floating in the clear sky. The young woman sighs heavily. Once she could run and toss up colorful leaves, but now she was confined to a wheelchair. She recalled a recent conversation with the head doctor of the surgical department. Henry had explained in detail to Melissa that she had literally been put back together piece by piece after the accident. The injuries were so severe that the prognosis was still questionable. Not only were her bones damaged, but also her internal organs. The doctor told her and her husband to definitely go to church and pray. It's a miracle she survived. Her husband, on the other hand, only suffered scratches. Jonathan was driving, and the investigation showed that he was the one who caused the accident. The man failed to control the car because he fell asleep. Melissa was also dozing when the car had hit a roadside pole at full speed. Now she had a new course of treatment ahead of her, but now the doctors sent her home for rehabilitation. Jonathan drove his wife in a wheelchair down the alley along the hospital buildings. He looked sullen and guilty. Don't be upset, Melissa told him softly. I don't hold a grudge against you. I hope you recover. Jonathan nodded his head and sighed noisily. I just don't know. You need a nurse now, don't you? I have to work. How are we going to get by without money? But I'll have the first group of disability. That's how we're going to pay for caregiving. There's also a $100,000 settlement. That's good. We're broke. It was the hardest time of Melissa's life. She couldn't do anything on her own, and every movement caused her unbearable pain. The young woman hired a nurse, an attentive, patient woman of her age. Her name was Lillian, and she had a lot of experience and real expertise in caring for such patients. Day after day, Lillian's caregiver pedantically followed the doctor's recommendations. In the morning, hygiene, exercises, breakfast. Then she would take Melissa for a walk. Of course, the patient liked to walk. Outdoors, she could feel like a living person. Melissa loved it when the fresh wind blew on her face and cold, wet snowflakes fell on her palms. She couldn't feel anything in her legs, though, and she couldn't even move them. Henry had told her that there was hope, though, and that eventually she would be able to walk. Melissa was losing faith in that with each passing day. Her nurse reassured her and told her that too little time had passed, so she needed to work hard every day and continue her treatments. Her fortitude impressed the young woman. In the afternoon, Lillian would give Melissa a massage, and in the evening they would go for water treatments. She took pearl baths and charcut showers. Jonathan was at work all day long. At first he spent a lot of time with his wife, but then he became distant and came to their apartment later and later. After the nurse left, Melissa was helpless. She was afraid to talk to her husband because he would get irritated and respond rudely to any request. Very often at night she was thirsty, probably from the large number of pills. Although Lillian left a glass of water on the bedside table, it quickly ran out. One day Melissa asked her husband to help her and bring her a new drink, to which he unleashed a torrent of profanity and insults. "I've had enough of you," he shouted. "Helpless chicken. I want to sleep all day at work and here to serve you. Can't you think of everything when you have a nurse with you?" Jonathan said all this to his wife without getting up from the sofa. He still hadn't brought her any water. Melissa justified her husband's behavior by being tired and worried about their life. Only in this she was deeply mistaken. For a couple of days later, Melissa overheard the terrible conversation that he and his mother were having with each other. The interlocutors thought she was sound asleep because she had taken sleeping pills. They were not shy. Jonathan said Hilary. "From visiting her in the village. She has a house there, and Sister Martha can look after her. She lives sort of in the neighborhood, doesn't work, has more time on her farm. And in the end, it'll be cheaper. A nurse is expensive." "It's not like Melissa's going to die," Jonathan said. "I talked to Dr. Henry, and he said she doesn't stand a chance." "That's true. He gave her a lot of reassurance that she wouldn't do anything. Wouldn't it be better if she did?" "I agree," Jonathan said. "It's a tough time. So that's what I'm telling you. Maybe when Melissa dies, you can have her house in the village. Her parents left it to her. Then I'll give you some money and you can buy yourself a nice 2-bedroom. And have kids again. At least I'll have grandchildren. Now she's lying here like a log, with no future." "Okay," Hilary said. "We'll call Kevin tomorrow, and I'll tell him to take my sister. It's a lot of money for this nurse and procedures, all paid for. It's a shame about the money." Of course, my mother-in-law agreed. "I was already against your marriage. I didn't raise you to look at a wretched woman. I want a happy life for my son, and there are no prospects here." Melissa could hardly hold back her tears when she heard that conversation. Everything inside her was sobbing. What on earth is being done? How can they be so cruel? Jonathan is the one who crippled her. It's all his fault. What a betrayal. She managed to love him after all his deeds. All night long the young woman sobbed into her pillow. And in the morning, when Lillian came and put her in the chair, she decided that she would not stay in this world any longer. And while her nurse was in the kitchen preparing breakfast and lunch, Melissa drank everything in her medicine cabinet. But the experienced Lillian knew what was wrong and called an ambulance in time. Melissa was pumped out. Jonathan and his mother took advantage of her suicide attempt and quickly called the village where her sister lived. "Hey Martha," Jonathan said into the phone. "I can't keep an eye on her all the time. I'm away during the day and at night I want to sleep. That's how your sister is going to end up dead. So if you want to see her alive, take her to the village." Martha was the eldest in the family and she agreed without hesitation. As Melissa shook in the back seat of the car on the way to the village, she thought back over her life. Pictures of her happy childhood floated before her eyes. A favored village near a large mixed forest, where they ran as children every day. Caring and loving parents Brandon and Patricia, a strong married couple, economic and hospitable. The Vasilevs' home always smelled of flavorful pies. On the table were treats from their own vegetable garden. Brandon cut down the house himself, big, comfortable, strong. Father loved his daughters very much, always called them beauties. Nature really gifted them with beautiful appearance. Both of them were light blonde, with blue eyes and correct facial features. They had grown up, and to their outer beauty had been added softness, femininity, features inherited from their mother. Melissa remembered her mother stroking her head before bedtime and telling her wonderful stories. Her voice was heartfelt and calm. A mother could convey useful things to her daughters without degrading their dignity. Thus, surrounded by the love of their parents, Martha and Melissa lived a carefree and happy life. But then a great misfortune happened. Their parents died. Ridiculously, but instantly. The two of them were digging a hole on the property for a septic tank. Natural gas escaped, and they both suffocated. Melissa and Martha were now adults and had graduated from high school. But the tragedy took its toll on them. Being without parents is hard at any age, and when you're young, it causes confusion, hopelessness, and despair. There is no readiness for independent life yet, and you want to lean on someone. There is no experience and worldly wisdom. There was no one to ask for advice and help. It was good that Martha and Melissa had been friends since childhood and supported each other in every situation. They were already adults, so the guardianship was not interested in them. The sisters began to lead independent lives. They were hard-working from childhood, and so they were engaged in the household and friendship. They lived soul to soul until Martha fell in love. From the school bench, she was courted by her classmate Leo, red-haired, curly-haired, modest and good-natured guy. He was the first to come to the aid of the sisters when he learned of their family tragedy, and literally every day came to them to help. After all, in a rural house need a man's strength to clean the stable and draw water from the well, somewhere something to nail, somewhere to dig beds. Leo, of course, had a burning eye. If the boy had been given a free hand, he would have sat with her all day long, holding her hand. Martha was partial to him, too, though she didn't show her feelings directly. But it was obvious that she liked the boy. Soon Melissa began to notice that the lovers were looking for a private place to be alone. The clever girl, under a plausible pretext, left the house, then in the library, then to former classmates' girlfriends. Tender dates led to the fact that Martha became pregnant, and as usual, they got married. Parents played the young couple a wedding, a wide and generous, rustic wedding. Their house was on the next street over, Melissa recalled. They set tables in the yard that were bursting with rustic treats, potatoes generously sprinkled with dill, fried pork, lard green onions, tomatoes, cucumbers, and popular salads, crab and olivier. All simple, but delicious. What else do you need for a rustic wedding? The groom's family had their own moonshine, and wine, grape, cherry, currant, all natural. Melissa remembered the tart taste of that August night. The scents of herbs and ripe apples wafted around, and then she wished she had been as successful. And the wedding was still going on. The adults began to sing songs, and the young ran to the river. How beautiful it was all around. The long-awaited coolness had descended on the earth, and the water was still warm. Everyone was splashing, joking, and laughing. There were few young people in the village. Many went to the city to study and stayed there. But they came to their parents. That's why there were a lot of young guests at the wedding. It was only later, on weekdays, that the village became empty, and only the echo of barking dogs and passing birds resounded in the neighborhood. Martha and Leo moved into his parents' house. It had 2 entrances, and they were assigned one half, despite their independent married life. They didn't leave Melissa behind, they went to help. And soon an official from the city came to their village to recruit social workers to care for elderly citizens. Melissa went straight to the village council in hopes of getting a job. Hilary, a lady of about 45, looked her upside down and invited her to sit across from her. "What is your education?" she asked. 11 grades, she replied. "I studied without fail. My diploma is good." "That you studied well is nice. But here's the thing to work with the elderly. You know, with age, people become irritable, nervous. Can you get along with them?" "I know them all. It's a small village. You can't treat them without respect. and I was brought up to respect my elders. Well, Melissa, let's get a job. I can see you're a serious and responsible person. So the girl got a job and coped with her duties admirably. The old people loved and waited for her. The store in the village is far away, and lonely people need fresh food every day. And to clean the house, to wash the floors, to apply water, a lot of things are needed. That is why the elderly people were grateful to Melissa and social services for such care. They did not want to leave here. They had been born and they wanted to stay until the last. They were happy that such care was organized for them. Melissa herself didn't want to move anywhere. Everything here was her own. But one day Hillary called and asked Melissa to come to town. There was a competition among social workers. They had to show their talents. The chairman said Melissa could sing and dance well. Me, Hillary? The girl said no. I can only sing Russian folk songs and dances in a simple way. Did anyone teach me to compete? Isn't there anyone better in town? So, my dear, they are looking for nuggets of talent to be bright and interesting, objected Hillary. Don't cross me. Come up with a number, even if it's simple, but with songs and dances. Maybe you won't be chosen for the contest, but you'll perform for the department. Protect your honor. Melissa wasn't used to arguing with her elders, so she accepted the leader's offer without complaint. She hadn't been in the city for a long time, almost 6 months. The last time she'd gone to the clinic for a checkup. And having arrived there, she was surprised by the big changes. In the center, there were several new stores with glass windows, and a new theater had been built. That's where the contestants were selected. The director of the social service center and her 2 deputies were sitting in the hall with an important look, and young girls' social workers crowded backstage. Each of them had prepared a number. Melissa's performance was considered banal and simple, and she was not accepted to the contest. She was only worried for nothing. But that day it was impossible to go home. The bus had left. It only made 1 trip a day. Melissa sat down on a bench in the theater square and called the hotel to rent a room until tomorrow. They had booked a 2-bedroom with only 1 bed for her. The girl decided to walk around the city and look around. After all, she hadn't been here often. Walking leisurely through the central square, Melissa didn't notice the lilac evening descending on the land. She stepped out onto the stone sidewalk that ran along the embankment and looked out at the river. The blue water reflected the light of the lanterns. There wasn't a soul around, and only one man sat pensively on a bench. As Melissa passed him, he suddenly said, "Why are you so young alone, afraid of a passerby? It's late." "Yes, I am rarely in the city, so I couldn't deny myself the pleasure of walking its streets," she replied. "And what do you find interesting in our provincial town?" asked the stranger with surprise. "I find a lot of things. Here, after all, civilization, parks, squares, after all, stands with ice cream. And we have only 2 stores for the whole village. Dirt roads, forest trails. I love my hometown, but I'm not averse to city comforts. So why don't you sit down?" A young man looked up at her. There was nothing remarkable about him. And if it weren't for the night and the empty street, Melissa would hardly have noticed him. "Yes, I'm a country girl, not used to your city life. All my life I walk barefoot on the grass, and in summer I disappear in the woods and rivers," the girl admitted. "But why are you sitting here alone?" "So my own mother kicked me out of the house. I did not please her. I do everything wrong. Now she's asleep, and I'm wandering around town." Melissa felt sorry for the stranger. "But if you'll vouch for yourself, let's go back to my place." Sleep over, pay the difference and take the other bed? I've already booked a room." "Let's go," the man agreed. "My name is Jonathan." "What's your name?" "I'm Melissa." It's a rare name. These days it's Angelina, Bogdan, and Brittany. And here it's just Melissa. But what did your parents call you? I have no complaints. I like my name, smiled the girl. It's a beautiful name. I haven't heard it for a long time. Jonathan got up from the bench and gave Melissa his hand. Together they walked to the hotel. The receptionist suggested that the man pay for the room, and he gladly agreed, depositing the money for Melissa, which embarrassed her. They went to bed at midnight in their clothes. In the morning, Melissa woke up to someone kissing her. She opened her eyes and tried to pull away from Jonathan, but he was much stronger. When it was over, Melissa cried bitterly. Well, what do you want? It's no big deal, the man justified himself. You're the one who called me. So I felt sorry for you. I told you I didn't have a place to sleep. I've never been with anyone before. How could you? What's the big deal? A man and a woman in the same room. That's how it could have happened, Jonathan continued. I'm going to report you, Melissa said sharply. Write it down to whomever you want. Jonathan grinned. Who's going to believe you? You invited a man to your room and then you're going to file a report. That's ridiculous. Melissa sighed tiredly and sat up on the bed. She looked at the guy's face and said, You have a mean soul. You took advantage of a naive girl and you're playing the hero. She got up from the bed, went to take a shower, and when she came out, she saw Jonathan stomping around the front door. Well, leave your phone number. I'm not a pig. Let's go out like people, he suggested. That's not much of a hunt, Melissa shrugged. Don't pretend, the young man said indignantly. Let me help you carry your things to the bus. But don't take offense. Listen, you're really like this by nature. I want to humanly, but the charms of the name I do not throw to you. Jonathan did follow her to the bus station and carried her bag with her things. He was persistent and Melissa gave in, leaving him her cell phone. The man called her for the first 2 weeks, always asking for a date in the city. Melissa said no. Then he stopped bothering her, and the girl lived her normal life. She didn't even tell her sister about the incident so as not to upset her. However, a month later, Melissa realized that she was pregnant. Not knowing what to do, she dialed Jonathan's number. Is this the gift you have in store for me? It must be revenge, he said. Why are you so stupid? There are plenty of women around, and he chose a countrywoman. Satisfied, the man mumbled into Henry's phone. What do you want me to do? I'm not getting rid of the kids, it's a sin. Melissa retorted. Well, if it's a sin, let's get married and have a baby. My mother, Emily, wants grandchildren for a long time. It doesn't matter if you or someone else gives me heirs. Maybe it's for the best. Or I'd never marry. Especially with country blood and milk. Healthy offspring. Can you give birth? City people are all sick. They have a lot of diseases, Jonathan reasoned. So pack your bags and come to the city, I'll meet you. But you have to let me know in advance. All night long, Melissa thought about her fate. She didn't want to live with a man she didn't love, but she didn't want to leave her child without a father either. The young woman gathered everything she needed, prayed in front of the iconostasis, and went to bed. In the morning, she went to the city. As promised, Jonathan met her at the station and immediately took her to his home to his future mother-in-law, Emily. Melissa was startled right from the doorstep. The woman was unattractive, short, crooked-legged, round-faced, and squinty-eyed. On top of that, Emily had an unpleasant, squeaky voice. When she spoke, it sounded like someone was driving metal over glass. The acquaintance was very unpleasant for Melissa. The woman picked on her every word and movement. She said the wrong thing, sat the wrong way, looked the wrong way. In general, she glared at the girl every minute. Without ceremony, Emily told the young people that she would live with them. She sold her apartment and put the money in an account. It'll do them good. After all, young people do not know how to do anything now, and everyone needs order, she said admonitively. She ordered Jonathan and Melissa to share a room. The next morning, Emily said bluntly, "You go find yourself a job. We're not going to feed you. Even though you're carrying my grandchild, you have to provide for yourself. I'm not a millionaire to support you in your old age." Melissa asked Hillary for the same job in the city. And that Hillary found her a place. "I'm all set," she announced happily to Jonathan's mom, Emily. "That's great," she smiled. "Who's going to cook? Separate from us. You cook for yourself. Well, maybe I will give you fruits or vegetables and the rest is all on your own. Don't come to me and my son for money. We're only taking you in because you're pregnant, and I'll charge you for utilities. You'll be using them light, water, gas, they're not free. Don't expect charity from me." Emily's greed knew no bounds. Melissa went to the marriage registration with Jonathan herself, having bought herself a dress and a bouquet. There were no guests at all. Jonathan wouldn't even let her friends come. "You live with us now, and by our rules," he told Melissa. "We don't want strangers. If you want to talk to your friend, you can come to her, but I forbid you to invite her." "How unhuman are you?" The girl couldn't stand it. "Well, go where it's human. Who'll take you in when you're pregnant? I don't know who would want you." In the future, Jonathan and Melissa's life was hard to call married. She felt like a total stranger in their home. The slanted glances of her mother-in-law and her constant nagging drove the girl to a frenzy. Once Emily so long mocked the young woman that she ran out of the house and stayed out all night. It was summer, but the weather was cold. Melissa caught a cold and ended up in the hospital. As a result, she had a miscarriage. Not only was she physically ill, but Jonathan and her mother were harassing her. "We took you in, and you didn't save our offspring. You ran off to some unknown place." The mother-in-law nodded, ranting to the whole hospital. "She brought you some fruit." She tossed a net of apples carelessly onto the nightstand. Melissa silently turned her back to the wall and felt hot tears burning her face. Melissa never touched her mother-in-law's treat. The apples seemed poisoned by the poison that came from Emily's soul. A few months later, there was an accident, followed by a terrible conversation where mother and son discussed Melissa as an unnecessary thing. It was disgusting. And now Melissa was on her way to her ancestral home. Jonathan gave her a dry goodbye, and he didn't even get out of the car to help Martha put his wife in the stroller. Melissa was greatly relieved when her sister brought her into the bedroom. The young woman smiled. Everything was just as it had been before, her childhood drawings and the big pink teddy bear on the bed. Martha had cleaned the entire house, and its smells brought a peacefulness to Melissa's soul. Insulted and humiliated, she cried quietly. "Thank you, sis, for caring," Melissa sobbed. "What would I do without you?" Martha put her arm around Melissa's shoulders and sobbed. "What kind of people are they? Married them. Now they want to get rid of them." "I haven't told you everything," the young woman sighed. And she told her sister the truth about the night at the hotel. "Why didn't you say anything, silly? You could see right away that the man was rotten. Why did you get involved with him? We could have helped you and Leo. We'd have helped you raise your child. Better alone than with such a despicable man." "That's right," Melissa agreed. "I was wrong. I didn't see the meanness in him. I thought he was just a weak man, like a man no one wanted. But he and his mother were in cahoots, and it got to the point where they'd be happy to dance on my bones at my grave. And they are not poor. They don't need anything. They live in a comfortable apartment, dress fashionably, eat well, but they dream about the death of a man so that they have more money." "Melissa, don't worry. What happens now happens now. We'll help you with everything. When Leo comes back, we'll be better off. I just wish I could wait for him," Martha sputtered and sat down on a stool. But her hopes were not to be realized. One day, the connection with Leo was cut off for several weeks. The woman had been worried sick, calling and writing to every authority. It seemed to Melissa that Sister Martha would go mad. She loved her husband Leo very much, and had 3 children by him. They lived peacefully, amicably, cheerfully. They got along with his parents, waited for Leo to come home together. Then came the sad news. The whole village gathered for the funeral. The women were in tears, and the men were standing, freezing in their hats. They were all of age and had great respect for the late Matthew. He was a good man and a great professional, worked in the village motor pool. There used to be all sorts of things, SUVs and tractors. Now it's just 2 old dump trucks and a van. But everyone used Matthew's services and brought their personal vehicles in for repairs, and he never turned anyone down. He realized that in such remoteness from the city, you can't do without cars. Leo's parents grieved for a long time. Martha had become very thin and was not herself. The children all circled around Melissa. Almost all day long they were in her house. She did homework with them, helped prepare meals. Martha would come, put her sister in the stroller, silently feed the chickens and ducks, and then come to the outskirts and stare at the woods and fields, weeping quietly. None of her relatives touched her. They understood that it took time to get over such grief. Slowly the woman withdrew a little, began to be included in the household and in the upbringing of children. Days flowed again with their succession. The forest was ablaze with bright colors. The last days of September brought warmth to the village. Melissa was often in the woods in the afternoons. She wanted to be alone, to breathe the crystal air, to enjoy the silence. One day she met a strange man on the forest path. The girl was surprised strangers didn't come here. "Halt," she shouted, limping, to the stranger in the back, and he turned around. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a bronze-tanned, strong-willed face. "Hello, are you on patrol around the property?" he asked peacefully. "Hello." "No," Melissa smiled. "It's just rare to see anyone in our forest." "Aren't you afraid? What if I have bad intentions? And you're alone in the middle of nowhere?" "What could I be afraid of in my position?" Melissa nodded at the stroller. "You're wrong. There are worse things to do. I'm looking for Martha Smith. You don't know her?" "I don't know her. She's my own sister." "Oh, great. I'm a friend of her husband Leo's. I came to visit you." "You knew Leo well?" "Well, let's go quickly. We really need you because your stories tell us he's alive." On the way, Rick, as the man introduced himself, told Melissa that he'd been wounded in the war. He told her that he and Leo were friends. Leo's parents listened with bowed heads, and the children kept their eyes on the man, eagerly catching his every word. "Your father, son, and husband was a hero. And he told me a lot about you. I know that Samantha likes to sleep before dinner," he said, glancing affectionately at a skinny girl of 9. "And the younger ones, Peter and Cheryl, go to the river in the summer without being asked." That's right, the children chorused, one and all with fiery red hair and freckled faces. "That's how I remember Leo too, with his cheerful freckles and bright green eyes. They are the epitome of him and all in his father." The man lived his life for a reason. He left such children, Rick thought to himself. He was with you all the way, wasn't he? Of course he wanted to come back, the man sighed, but it didn't come true. "So I came here to help you. That was our agreement. He must have sensed his own demise. He asked me to come to help his wife, his parents, his children. So Martha, give me everything you need for the household. Don't be shy, tell me. I'm a carpenter. I can cook a little, and I'm not afraid of any labor." "Thank you. It's a little cramped in here, though. But you can stay with Melissa's sister, Martha. It's a big house, and she won't be so scared." "She doesn't want to move in with us. She's kind of shy," Rick smiled broadly, glancing toward Melissa. "I don't even think that girl's afraid of hell. Let's go." Melissa beckoned him to follow. Rick hefted the travel bag onto his powerful shoulders and followed. He watched as the young girl deftly handled the wheelchair. When he reached Melissa's house, Rick couldn't contain his admiration. What a beauty. The man admired the carved ornaments on the structure. The hands of a master. Who has such golden hands? "My late father's," Melissa replied. "That was a master." Rick's eyes sparkled with delight. The young woman looked up at him and marveled at the mighty strength of her new acquaintance. For some reason, she was not afraid of the presence of a strange man in the house. On the contrary, she felt protected. Every morning, the girl went out in a wheelchair into the yard and watched with amusement as the stern, silent Rick fed the birds in their backyard. He wasn't squeamish about making breakfast for Melissa. However, the man made it a condition that he would buy all the food himself and with his own money. He did not accept any objections. For the first time in her life, Melissa caught herself thinking that it felt good to accept help. Rick's whole demeanor was calm and eager to be helpful. He took her into the woods every day, and Melissa showed him the places where they had played with their peers as children. Immediately, a smile appeared on her face. They chose different routes, admired nature, picked mushrooms and berries. It was also customary for them to go for an evening walk, have dinner on the riverbank, and talk. It was the only thing that made Melissa feel so unfit to be a woman. Ah, if only she could be the same. How much happiness she could give this man. Sometimes Melissa felt homesick and would sneak away from home. One day, after a rainstorm, the young woman got stuck in the mud and tried in vain to get out. The girl cried, put her hands on her knees, and froze. Let me stay here in the woods. I'll only disturb everyone anyway, she whispered. Then she felt someone push her wheelchair and it rolled easily out of the mire. Melissa turned and saw that it was Rick. Suddenly she realized that she wasn't ashamed to accept his help. After all, there was no pity in this man's eyes that she had so often seen in other people. His gaze radiated warmth and calmness. Here he knew for sure that one must live, no matter what. "I'm sorry," Melissa said. "I'm just a little homesick." "I understand," the man nodded. At that moment, she realized that she was not indifferent to him. Some unknown pinching feeling enveloped every cell of her body, and Rick was getting more and more used to Melissa. She was afraid every day that he would leave, but he wasn't going to. "I've got money, a fridge full of groceries," he said. "Leo, fix the car. We can go to the city in peace. I'll stay with you for now." Martha was sneaking conversations with Rick too. She liked everything about him, but she saw the beginnings of true love in her sister's heart. "Melissa?" Martha asked. "No, I can see that she's attached, but I'm afraid there's no future for you two. I can see that you like each other, but she's a cripple." "And you don't give up," Rick said firmly. "You said the doctor gave her hope." "Well, she's just a little girl," Martha countered. "That's good. You know how miracles happen?" Rick remarked. "You probably know better than I do, having seen more than I have. But let's all do our best. Let's follow the recommendations to the end, and then we'll see." Rick's words encouraged Martha and gave her faith in her sister's recovery. She diligently began to do exercises with her every day and invited a witch doctor from the village, who was famous throughout the area. Abigail, the old witch doctor, tall and sturdy, came to Melissa's house every day and carefully kneaded her lower back and limbs. What she was doing was unclear. Her methodology remained a mystery. But after 3 months, Melissa's feet were moving, and after 5 months, leaning on Rick's arm, she was walking in the pine forest to her favorite places. They were timid steps, and it took them hours to get there, carrying the chair with them. When the young woman grew tired, she would transfer to the chair and Rick would roll her along the forest trails with the breeze. Still, she felt like a normal person now, and she even had plans for the future. "Rick, I'm so grateful to you and Kevin and Abigail," Melissa said. "I honestly didn't think I'd ever stand on my own 2 feet. Now that I'm stronger, I'd like to do something useful." "You can't even do chores yet," Rick said. "I've got an idea I'd like to share with you. I've got a lot of money saved up, and I don't want to spend it. I used to be a carpenter. My business was good. I had an excellent labor teacher at school. He taught me how to make doors, tables, and chairs. I'd like to suggest that you set up a workshop in one of the rooms. We only have 2, but there's 6 of them. Your father set it up. Is there room? And you'll be my assistant, taking orders, keeping accounts. How's that sound?" "Great," Melissa said. "I'm all for it. How do I repay you for your concern?" "Oh, come on," Rick stopped her. "I didn't start this to thank you. I'm happy with the decision myself. And don't you dare make any bows. But what I offered you, I can do. Let's do it together." And in a month, both of them were already working in the village workshop. The demand was great. It was far from the city. Deliveries were expensive. And here everything was close by. And Rick was an excellent craftsman. Good workmanship went fast. Sometimes, though, they worked late, but willingly. One day the young men made a day off, took fishing rods, and went to the river. The bite that day was excellent. Rick and Melissa competed, who has faster buckets filled with beautiful fish. And the girl won. She jumped up and down with joy and teased Rick a little. "You've got to be more agile. And you're standing there thinking about something you don't know what you're thinking about. Tell me, what are you thinking about?" The man put the fishing rod on the ground, came closer to her, and gently put his arm around her waist. He looked Melissa in the eyes and said, "You and I have been together for 6 months now, living in the same house, and I realize that I really need you, but I think it's time to make this relationship official. How do you feel about that?" Melissa was a little confused. She wrapped her slender arms around his neck and nestled her lips against his. So they stood by the quiet river and kissed to the birdsong. They embraced in silence, which was broken only by the occasional splashes of frogs jumping into the water. "I wouldn't be away from you for a moment," the young woman smiled. "But what about my marriage?" She sighed. How? What to do? Rick was surprised. Divorce. That's understandable. But I don't want to see that traitor, that cruel man. Yes, now everything can be done in absentia, and you'll be divorced quickly. I'll give you the money. Yeah, thanks. I'm going to be examined soon. Of course, they'll take away my disability and my benefits will stop. So I'll take it. I'll take yours, Rick. So what? I don't care about the benefits. You and me, we're doing good. We got a house. It's so beautiful, it's breathtaking. Your sister's around, your nephews too. We'll get our own. Rick gave Melissa a playful look. How would you like that? Yeah, I'd love to, Melissa smiled. Then let's pack up and go. And holding hands, the happy young people headed home. Rick stirred in his sleep. He opened his eyes and looked at Melissa sleeping next to him. Carelessly throwing on a sheet, he stepped out into the yard and froze, listening to the crickets singing. After an outdoor shower with wet, fierce hair, he made his way to the kitchen to boil the kettle, holding the steaming knob in his hand. He walked to the window. Beyond it was a thick night and a clear sky studded with stars. In an instant, the room was filled with the smells of the passing summer. He took a sip of tea, set the cup on the windowsill, and returned to the bedroom. And the next day, a big surprise awaited them. In the afternoon, someone knocked loudly on the door. Rick was sound asleep. Melissa wrapped herself in a sheet and went to open the door. Jonathan stood on the doorstep. He stared at his wife in surprise. Before him was a beautiful Melissa, with a blush playing on her cheeks. Melissa stood on her feet. How's that? He'd already backed up. Were you even in the chair? Melissa took a bold step toward him. She held her head up proudly as she stepped through the door. I have. I did. And you're not happy about my health? Rick came out of the door. Jonathan was surprised. She's already got a boyfriend. That's not nice. When he was alive, maybe. Was it good for a wife to leave a sick man to his fate? Rick asked angrily. What business is it of yours? Who the hell are you? Me. I'm a normal guy, Rick said. He walked over to Melissa and put his arm around her shoulders. You're a cowardly, sneaky bitch. You dare insult me. Jonathan forbade it. So who is insulting you? Rick replied calmly. I'm telling the truth. The fact of the matter is everything. You married her and took responsibility for her. And then you abandoned her like a useless thing and ran away. What? Are you here for the inheritance now? I thought she was dead asleep. Here, have a bite. Rick gave Jonathan the finger. Live and breathe. Get out to here. Wait for the court notice. She'll file for divorce. Jonathan looked up at them, his eyes wide with fear, and no remorse. He turned and walked away. The young people watched him until the man's figure became a tiny dot on the horizon. Let him go. It's a kilometer to the bus, Rick grinned, pulling Melissa close to him. He'd wasted a ride, and the earth bears them. They stood huddled close together. A tall, strong man held in his arms a fragile woman who was a head shorter than his chosen one, and seemed defenseless in his powerful arms. Their souls were filled with happiness. These two knew what life was all about. After pain, suffering, and despair, they finally tasted the sweet fruits of existence. And Jonathan returned to town penniless. But soon Emily got what she wanted. She was just delighted that she finally got rid of the unwanted daughter-in-law and was waiting for her son to find a normal girl. It is only necessary to restrain the son, so that he knew his chosen one did not offer his hand and heart yet, to look closely. Clearly, the man in the city needs a woman, but let them live in a civil marriage, just as the woman had planned. To her great joy, Jonathan soon had an affair with a female co-worker at work. He had long worked as a stagehand in the city theater. And then leading actress Samantha had her eye on him. That was something to be proud of. The theater actress was a media personality by provincial standards. Everyone in town knew her and said hello when they met her. Not like Melissa, a country girl, married and ugly, naive, stupid, and clueless about life. Samantha was the complete opposite of her, grasping, stubborn, and cunning. She's the kind of woman who'll make Jonathan's life worth living. She knew life, and she wouldn't be lost. But Emily's joy was short-lived. The chosen one of her son turned out to be a cruel and very selfish person. At first, they both could not breathe on her, and as if they did not notice the arrogance and sharpness of the woman. She made it clear to Jonathan's mother that she did not need any advice, and that the man would obey only her. And a little later completely dumbfounded the elderly woman, announcing that she had to move out of the apartment and leave them to live together. After entering high society, Samantha mocked borscht and cutlets Jonathan's mother, considering them a relic of the past. She would not go near the stove at all, she was just squeamish about it. So she and Jonathan ate at cafes and restaurants, which cost a lot of money. When Emily hinted at this, Samantha gave her a scornful look and said, "Mother, don't meddle in our affairs. We can do without you. I, thank God, earned good money and can afford to eat properly. Do you want me, the prima donna of the theater, to walk around with such a manicure?" She stretched forward a well-groomed, graceful hand with a perfect manicure. Washing pots and pans or peeling potatoes. You don't get it, do you? Don't you realize who you're dealing with? Do you think I'm a dumb housewife or a great actress who gets applause all over town? So Mom, drop the insinuations and get on with your life. Can't you see you're dealing with adults? You want to run this place? It won't work with me. But Jonathan likes home-cooked food, Emily tried to object. He loved it before me. And now we're going to be watching calories and waist size. I signed Jonathan up for the gym. Let him watch his figure. The elderly woman clutched her head. You have to go to the gym after a hard day's work. She's totally draining my son. Samantha kept Jonathan under her thumb, and he could only go out with his mother under her supervision. She thought it was best to keep her common-law husband away from dangerous influences. Emily had to rent an apartment. She felt like an exile there. Her son did not come to her at all, not even for dinner, let alone for help, such as moving furniture or taking a broken washing machine to the repair shop. One day she tried to complain about this to Samantha. She replied, "I'll give you the number of a handyman who comes to your house to fix machines. And there's a cleaning and domestic help agency. Google it, Emily, it's all on the internet. It's not hard work, you'll find the contacts yourself." But how will I pay for these services? The pension is small, she asked. What's my concern? What's my concern? I have my own mother, a very independent lady. But you won't let my son help me, cried the lonely woman. Why not? It's just that he doesn't want to go himself. He's got a lot to do. And he has to go to the gym. What does he live for? If he doesn't pay attention to me, how many men will be around? I'm very attractive. Yes, you are, Emily thought. God sent that lady. She had to watch her favorite son care for the welfare of his beloved, to earn money for cafes and restaurants. After work, he worked part-time as a loader and janitor. Samantha did not lift a finger so as not to spoil the image of a social diva. She only bought expensive clothes and shine at receptions. To Jonathan, she slowly gave strict instructions on housekeeping. He cleaned, grocery shopped, cooked, and did her laundry if she was lazy. Samantha had her own life trajectory: spas, fitness centers, coffee with friends, play rehearsals, touring. It began to dawn on Emily that such a woman was unlikely to want to give birth, and she would be left without grandchildren. One day she asked Samantha a question on the subject. "Are you trying to make me a performer?" "Oh, really? Can't you see I don't want to spend money on other people? Who's going to stay up all night and take care of these kids? I have no time at all." But it's the continuation of the family, the thread. You have to love someone. You have to love yourself first of all. Samantha, the prima donna of the theater, replied instructively. After these words, Emily walked around offended and tried to tell Jonathan. "Son, I wanted us to live together and run the household. I'd babysit my grandchildren. I'd even sell my car to do it. And now I've been kicked out of my apartment. That woman has a lot of power over you. Not only did she kick me out, but she's exploiting you." "Don't be so dramatic," Jonathan waved her away irritably. "Samantha is a smart woman, and she's doing the right thing. I thought I'd be there to help you. I'll cook somewhere, clean up, and when the grandchildren come, I'll babysit." "What grandchildren?" What are you talking about? Samantha has a career, Fame. We still want to live for ourselves. And a housekeeper would do a much better job. We're thinking about getting one now. You can get sick or get in the wrong places. But from her, we can demand to do what is necessary. Talk strictly, not ceremonious. And we can ask her out the door at any time if she gets fed up. That's what they asked me to do, Emily complained to her son, sobbing. Well, you have some savings. Buy yourself an apartment. After all, I'm an adult and should live separately. Or how do I do with you, if you yourself did not want to go anywhere? At least on weekends I can walk with you in the park. We're busy on weekends. I don't have time to go out. I don't have time on weekdays to be with my wife and go out with you. It's petty grudges and tears. Emily couldn't help herself. You'll feel what it's like to be ignored by your own people. Stop cursing at me. Jonathan was outraged. Go do your own thing and leave me alone. You should have had more children. You'd be traveling around with them, and you wouldn't have the time to worry about the attention. Life would have been peaceful. Is this the thanks you get, son? For all I've done for you? I didn't ask you to do anything for me. Maybe you still need to do the honors? Jonathan replied. Samantha wants to officially marry me. I'll marry her, and then I'll be good and happy. Oh, you will be, Emily lamented. And you've already gotten into it with Samantha. Well, I'm sorry, but I have to agree with you on this one. I never loved her. I just picked her up out of pity. But now I'm crazy about Samantha. We don't need your advice. I'd appreciate it if you'd stay out of my family. I'm not giving Samantha to anyone. Finally, a woman like that. Emily sighed heavily and left. She'd gotten used to being alone, but she couldn't fully accept it. 1,000 times she regretted that she had treated poorly the simple country girl who was willing to do anything to make her son happy. It came to her that a boomerang had come into her life. She had kicked out. She had been kicked out. She had offended. Now she was being offended. There was nothing she could do against Samantha. That woman would not let anything get in her way. The only hope was that Jonathan would someday get bored with Samantha and leave her. And that prospect didn't take long to materialize. As soon as Samantha was courted by the mayor's son and offered to marry her, she immediately threw Jonathan out of her heart and soul. Emily returned to the apartment to help and support the man. But he fell into a drunkenness and only waved his mother away. It's all your fault. All meddled, Samantha annoyed. That's why she left in the end. The son quit his job and plunged into a long drunkenness. A bad habit took over him. And he almost 6 months did not part with a drink, quit the theater, saying that he cannot every day to see the former. Jonathan didn't get a new job. It was hard to live on one pension, but to all the requests of his mother he remained deaf. When Emily got tired of her son's loneliness and inattention, she took the advice of a neighbor who spent all day on a dating site. She always told her that you should not wait for a miracle, and you need to create it yourself. So the woman decided to register on such a resource. Going through the photos of candidates, she stopped at one man. It was a handsome man who looked about 70 years old. Of course, under the photo was the age of 57. Likes to embellish, the woman thought. But that was okay. It wasn't that scary. The man attracted her by the fact that he did not put forward a long list of requirements. He simply wrote that he was looking for someone close in spirit, so that they would be good together. Emily was the first to take the initiative and texted him, "Let's date." The man was cautious and at first tactfully asked her about her interests and told her about his hobbies himself. She liked that their conversations were only about pleasant subjects. So Emily found information that an exhibition of rare fruit trees was touring the city and invited the man there. He gladly agreed. The date was set at the front entrance of the local history museum, where the exotic exhibition was brought. The day before, Emily, seriously engaged in her appearance, went to the hairdresser, did a manicure, and then went to a beautician. All these procedures helped her look 5 years younger. Dressed in a modern new blouse and a long leather skirt, she looked great. Even the drunken Jonathan, who had fallen out of the door of his room, sobered up for a moment and stared at his mother in bewilderment. "Where are you dressed up? You think you're going to sneak away from me?" "No. Mother ruined my private life, and I'll ruin it for you." Emily had no doubt about that. Her son considered her the culprit of all his troubles and tried to take revenge in every possible way. He spat, taking food from her hands, constantly demanded money, and insulted the woman every day. Stepping outside, Emily breathed a sigh of relief. At least this way she could forget about her complicated relationship with Jonathan. The neighbors sitting on the bench looked at her in surprise. "Where are you going so dressed up, Emily?" "Out for a walk." The woman waved them away. She was looking forward to seeing them again, and had been imagining what it would be like all along the way. So she was a little taken aback when she saw her chosen one in a pair of worn jeans, a stale shirt, and a wrinkled jacket. But immediately she restrained herself, justifying it by the fact that after all he was a single man. There were no women's hands in the house. That's why he was like that. But at the museum, Oliver surprised her too. In correspondence, he indicated that he was fond of gardening, and at the exhibition only did what he was looking at visitors, especially young women. She excused him, saying it was just curiosity and nothing more. When they left the building, he didn't invite her to a cafe or a park, but went straight to his house. Emily, who was hungry for male attention, immediately agreed. His apartment was small, but tastefully furnished. The furniture was inexpensive, but good. In courtship, the man was experienced. He immediately took out a bottle of champagne, fruit and candy from the refrigerator. He set it all down in front of Emily. She became intoxicated by his concern and accepted the advances. After a couple glasses of champagne, the woman decided not to let the initiative out of her hands and offered to dance. She passionately kissed the bow and waited for the same response. Instead, she received a certain coldness. The man somewhat distanced himself and explained it by the fact that, say, there was no need to hurry, we need to get to know each other well, and then allow themselves all sorts of liberties. After that, he called a cab and sent his lady home. The next day, Emily waited tensely for a call from her admirer, and Oliver did call her and offered to meet on her property. She quickly agreed and began to think of somewhere to take her son out for that time. Jonathan was just in a state where he could take care of himself. So she sent Jonathan to her Aunt Tyr's house in the countryside and gave him money for a drink. After seeing her son off on the train, she came home and cleaned the whole apartment. Then she took care of herself, took a bath. She seemed to use exquisite creams and perfumes. And of course, she got busy preparing the treats. When the guest arrived, the table was bursting with viands, chops with pineapple, hearty salads with mayonnaise, meat cuts. The woman spent her entire pension on this treat. The only money left in her purse was for bread. This time Oliver came to her very dressed up, in a perfect evening suit and a white shirt and tie. In his hands he held a large bouquet of scarlet roses. The whole evening the man did nothing but compliment her on what a wonderful hostess she was, a dazzling beauty and a wonderful conversationalist. After dinner, Emily tried to get close to the man again, turned on some lyrical music and sat next to him on the couch. Oliver's reaction to her proximity was very strange. He jumped up sharply and said that he had to go home. He said that his close relative was coming from a distant land and that he had to get ready. The woman was discouraged, but took the man's problem with understanding and let him go. He said goodbye and promised that he would call her tomorrow and make a date with her. Emily was insanely happy that their relationship was continuing. It meant that Oliver liked her. Late that night, Jonathan returned from his trip and told her how his meeting with Aunt Thera had gone. He could barely stay on his feet. Oliver didn't call the next day, though Emily kept her cell phone ringing. In the light of the past events, she thought that she was in heaven, and the meeting with a new acquaintance will never happen. But the woman reassured herself there is no telling what kind of health problems can be at such an age. And moreover, the relatives came to visit. It's just that the man has no time for me. What was her surprise when the next morning she woke up to the fact that someone unceremoniously pounded her door with his fist. She jumped up, threw on her robe, and ran to the peephole to see that it was Oliver. "Sorry to be here so early," he said. "I need to see you." Relieved that the man had missed her, Emily swung the door open and let him in. He walked across the carpet into the hall in his boots and sank tiredly onto the couch. The woman sat down beside him and placed her hand on his. "Well, tell me what happened to you," she asked. The man twitched his hand and stared at her in silence. Emily realized she was being impolite and offered him tea or coffee. Oliver nodded silently, and the woman went into the kitchen. When she came into the room with a cup of steaming, fragrant coffee, She found the man sleeping on her couch with his booted feet tucked under him. She couldn't understand what was going on, but she didn't bother to wake her guest. For once a man was in her apartment. She'd divorced Jonathan's father when he was a year old. He'd been going out, picking women younger than him, and this was such a nice man. Something extraordinary must have happened. Maybe a fight with the family, maybe something else. Pity overwhelmed Emily's heart. She covered her beau with a warm, clean blanket and left the room. He woke up immediately, didn't explain anything, but asked to stay in the apartment for a few days. Emily warned him that she had a son and that he drank. Oliver didn't let that stop him. He was determined to stay with Emily. Despite the negativity coming from Jonathan, the man showed the most positive side of himself. He was polite, tactfully adapted in everyday life, and also proved to be a good lover. At his age, and Emily was overjoyed. How lucky she was. A few days later, Oliver asked her to go to his apartment to get his things. It turned out that it was rented and had to be vacated. The woman was very happy that her beloved decided to finally move in with her. All day she fussed, cooked a delicious dinner, and held educational conversations with her son. But her happiness had the opposite effect on Jonathan. He was angry and cursed. "Jonathan, let me buy you an apartment," Emily said. "I may only have enough for a one-bedroom now, but it's yours." "Well, you can go back to your one-bedroom. Where am I going to stay?" "I have every right to stay," replied the son. Emily was struggling with the housing issue and decided to discuss it with her boyfriend. She called Oliver and explained that her home had long been a gift to her son, and he didn't want to leave it, and she didn't have enough money to buy a new one. He turned out to be a wise man and offered to wait, promising to be there in person soon. By evening, however, Oliver had not shown up, and calls to his number had no effect. Emily lay awake at the window all night. Jonathan noticed her agitation and said wryly, "You have done so much evil to people in life that you will not be happy, will not come here you sick. And you, Santa, are you clean?" The woman couldn't stand it, just white and fluffy. "We started the car together, so don't play the victim." "She's happy now." Jonathan laughed. "We are bred and we are from fate and retribution. Stop imagining what we have done. We both didn't like her. It's called mother use. We treated her like a thing and did nothing wrong." "No, let's face it," he announced, pouring himself a glass of vodka. "Only I can pour it all away, and you'll have to live with it for the rest of your life." "Get out of here," Emily ordered. "Leave me alone. It's hard enough as it is." The next morning, the woman was not herself from the excitement of the experience, did not find a place. It seemed to her that something irreparable had happened to Oliver. She decided to go to his old address and find out everything. Maybe the man needed help. The door of his apartment was opened by a young and very beautiful woman. She had a slender figure, large breasts and wide hips. With her legs spread wide, the bright brunette was smoking a cigarette. "Who are you here to see?" she asked Emily. "I'm here to see Oliver. I'm looking for him. He's missing. He used to live here, rented an apartment. Maybe you know something?" Suddenly, the woman burst out laughing. "Of course I know everything about him, because I'm his wife. Of course. I wonder who you are." Emily was stunned. She felt so dizzy that she leaned against the wall and moved back toward the elevator. "Hey, who are you? Why are you showing up in the morning, bothering people?" she heard herself say. The feeling of humiliation was so strong that the woman could not control herself and began to sob. The old ladies gathered in the courtyard looked at her in amazement. "What's wrong with you, woman? Why are you crying bitterly?" they asked in unison. Emily could not stand it and told them the whole story. "Did you get trapped where you wanted to go?" They told her that Oliver and his young wife ran a swindling business, finding old ladies and swindling them. They're known all over the neighborhood, so they prey on strangers. Back home, the woman called her son into the kitchen. "Where's your vodka? Give mother a shot," she asked. Jonathan went out and soon returned with a bottle. He filled the glasses. "To life," Emily said. "It's a bitter life." There's no need to complain about life, Jonathan said conciliatingly. We are what we are, and so is life. The law of the boomerang has never been repealed. Emily nodded. Empty. She got up from the table, walked to her bedroom, and collapsed tiredly on the bed. Melissa's image suddenly appeared in her dreams. What did you want, Emily? What measure is right for you, she said. You left a sick woman to fend for herself. You didn't want to take responsibility for her. And you turned your son against her. And now suddenly you want a woman's happiness. Where would it come from? All your life you've been sowing anger, envy, and discontent around you. That's why everything good is repelled from you. And life turned into a crumpled, dirty, useless leaf. Emily became so bad and ashamed that she did not want to wake up at all. After this incident, the woman became seriously ill and was hospitalized. No treatment regimen worked. Her blood pressure was at an all-time high. Emily, you're lying here for nothing. A gypsy woman, a neighbor in the ward, suddenly spoke to her. You have to get discharged immediately, or they'll heal you. Go home and review everything. And if you find anything foreign, burn it immediately. I can see that you're under a spell. Tired of treatment, and even more than from illnesses, the woman suddenly believed the stranger and left the hospital. When she returned home, she found a bundle of black inhuman hair under the sofa cushions. Fear gripped the woman. She realized that Oliver and his wife were also practicing magic and wanted to kill her. So when he slept on the couch, he'd put the magic thing there. Then when he found out it was Jonathan's apartment, he ran away. It was so scary that even after they realized that they couldn't take anything from Emily, the couple never removed the spoil. The woman squeamishly took the find, threw it in the sink, and wanted to set it on fire. Her hands were shaking with anger and indignation. The matches broke and wouldn't light. At last the flame burst out, and then the woman could not stand it and wept bitterly. And Melissa in the village was really enjoying her well-deserved happiness. She had gotten a divorce, and the young people were preparing to get married. What was their surprise when the former mother-in-law showed up on their doorstep in the early August morning? Melissa didn't even recognize her at first. "Hello, Melissa," Emily said in a squeaky voice. "Don't look at me like that. I know I'm sorry for what I did to you. Just don't send me away, Jonathan. When you came to our house and waited for the bus, we told him Abigail the witch doctor was involved in your healing. You know, I know it too." Melissa didn't hold back. "I realize you've never forgiven me, but I need you to take me to her. I've been cursed by dark people. I'm terribly ill. Have pity on me and help me to sin." "Okay, I will," Jonathan agreed. The young woman looked questioningly at Rick, who was standing next to her. He nodded silently. Melissa and Emily walked through the village to the witch doctor's house. They had nothing to talk about. Abigail, wearing a colorful white shawl, sat on a bench in front of her house. She began to speak without greeting. "You, woman, can be helped. Only you have a great sin on your hands, and the spoil holds on to it." "I know all my sins." Emily stopped and fell to her knees in front of Melissa. "I'm sorry I've done you a lot of harm. I confess I hated you fiercely. God humbled my pride. I sincerely apologize." "God will forgive. Stand up." Melissa gave her a hand. She stood up, shook herself, and looked at Abigail pleadingly. "Go," she commanded. "You won't get sick again, but you won't live happily ever after. Go to church, pray, repent. Don't come here again. It's a clean place and good people live here, even though it's in the middle of nowhere. We don't need your city vicissitudes for nothing. We have a forest near the river. The sky is big, blue, clear, and our life is clear. So go back with yours and try to live by God's laws. Then you won't shout, 'Why do I have these troubles?'" "Thank you," thanked Emily and headed for the bus stop. She wasn't sick anymore, and she wasn't seeing Melissa anymore. Rick loved the falling leaves and big winter snows in the quiet village, the wonderful forest on the outskirts of the village, and the calm river waters. Less and less often he had dreams from his past life. His soul was now a little calmer under the influence of local morality. The first ice crunched under his feet. Melissa was walking towards him in a delicate cream-colored dress with a bouquet of white roses in her hands. A fairy girl, Jonathan thought lovingly. The dark side of life gave way to the divine light he saw in the eyes of the woman he loved. The earthly path had thrown him different roles, but the best fate had prepared him to be a loving husband and future father. Happy Mom was by his side today. She cried when he introduced her to Melissa. The wise woman immediately discerned in the bride impeccable purity, devotion, ability to sacrifice. A simple country girl with no education, but courageous and unbroken. She looked at her son in such a way that it made my throat constrict. There was so much enthusiasm and love in her eyes. Today is the wedding day, and the loved ones are around. On their faces, sincere joy. Here it is a warm family atmosphere, mutual understanding and respect, advice and love. Jennifer and David had known each other since high school. They'd sat at the same desk for 5 years, sharing cribs and canteen buns. After school, they walked home together to the first intersection. Their families were friends, their parents worked together, and often went to visit each other, taking their children with them. David had been making fun of Jennifer's haircut for 2 years, calling her a kid. Jennifer couldn't stand his jokes, the dirt under his fingernails, and the stupid look on his face. Despite their frequent quarrels, her parents had said since childhood that they looked good together. They predicted a wedding. And so it was. It all started with a waltz. At graduation in the school hall, their class was divided into pairs in early May and obliged to go to rehearsals after school. David refused to dance with his partner because he was afraid of dropping her or stepping on her foot. Jennifer was also very shy about dancing. David suggested that the line partner switch. For 2 weeks they twirled properly as a couple. On the 3rd week they began to feel strangely embarrassed, looking into each other's eyes and holding hands. On the 4th, David couldn't take it anymore. On the way home, he tugged Jennifer by the edge of her apron and blurted out, "Jennifer, I love you." "I think, do you?" "And I think I do," she mumbled, feeling her cheeks flaming. After graduation, they enrolled in the same university. For a whole month, they enjoyed their freedom and each other. They walked until dawn, took the electric train to the bay to swim and roast bread by the fire. Their parents did not interfere with their meetings and the development of romantic relationships. Jennifer received a proposal of marriage from David a year later and agreed without hesitation, with the only condition: first you need to get an education. Both found paid internships in large construction firms. On vacation after the session, often went on independent travel in Europe, America, and Asia. They graduated from university together, she with a blue diploma and David with a red one. After university, they worked as engineers by specialty. The wedding was played modestly, as the newlyweds wished after the signing of the champagne and launching doves from the threshold of the registry office. Most of the guests were led home after the banquet. Only the closest relatives and a couple of best friends came to David's parents' house. Jennifer often looked at the photograph taken on her and David's wedding day. It hung on the wall in their living room. The two of them, young and happy. David in a simple shirt, she in a light summer dress with open shoulders. Nearby hung pictures of their children. Jennifer had never dreamed of children. Her dreams for the future were limited to a successful career and a job with a vocation. From a young age, she had been striving to figure out what that calling was. After graduation, she changed several jobs and specialties. Nothing could interest her for a long time. But Jennifer wasn't about to give up. On her 30th birthday, she planned to change her life once again abruptly to quit the company where she worked for 2 years. Fate decided otherwise and gave Jennifer a sudden pregnancy. A double. David didn't interfere with her decision to keep the children. He knew that his wife would not listen to him and would do everything in her own way. Jennifer, after consulting with her mother and David's parents, decided to give birth. "I'm going to try a new role," she announced at a family meeting. "What if I like it? Maybe I'm meant to be a mother." The pregnancy was easy. Jennifer spent the entire 9 months meeting with friends, attending trade shows and a school for new parents. Together with David, the two of them set up a children's corner in the living room, bought a crib and a small dresser, baby clothes, diapers and toys. After the birth, the family got back together at David and their parents' house. David's father sat in a rocking chair, holding his granddaughter in each hand, Claire in his left, the jar in his right. And Madison's newfound grandmothers were setting the table. Jennifer's father, along with David, arranged chairs around the table. Jennifer herself was half reclining on the couch, trying to get into a position where her postpartum stitch wouldn't hurt. She looked at the peaceful bustle around her and was convinced of the rightness of her decision to become a mom. She loved this new chapter of their life and life together. The first year of motherhood flew by. Before Jennifer knew it, when she took the traditional photos of the twins on their birthday, she was wondering how these well-fed children had fit on her lap a year ago. In the constant care of children, and order in the house, changing diapers, cooking, cleaning, laundry, playing with the girls, evening baths, walks. The routine seemed to eat up all the time and attention. But Jennifer didn't complain. She liked to take her time doing housework, taking care of the children and putting the house in order. David took full charge of the family, and after work he would go to the market and the supermarket to buy groceries and everything he needed. Jennifer did not go shopping because of the queues and the incredible heaviness of the twins and the stroller. The second year went just as smoothly. Parents began to visit often, which allowed the young couple to get away to a restaurant or meet with friends. Jennifer and David were grateful for their parents' support and privacy. When Claire and Madison turned 3, the question of daycare came up. Jennifer was adamantly opposed to putting her children in the care of strangers. She and David sat in the kitchen after putting the girls to bed and argued heatedly. What do they feed them? How are they looked after? The other day your mom told me how a kid got hit by a car outside the kindergarten. He'd gone out of the yard and into the road while walking. There's no safety, Jennifer said. David shook his head silently. Won't you go crazy sitting at home? Are you having some kind of problem at work? He asked. Why would you think that? Are you so desperate for me to go to work? Admit it. Are we beggars? David laughed. No, of course that's not the point. What is it about? Jennifer asked. Are you jealous of my carefree life as a housewife? And you want equality justice? No, I'm just worried about you, David replied. Jennifer advanced on the stool toward her husband. And what is the reason for your worries? Aren't you bored? 3 years at home. It used to be that neither salary nor career success could keep you in one place for long. What about a vocation? Jennifer asked. I think I found it. Yeah, she raised her voice indignantly. Don't make that face. It's the truth. I really like being a mom. I don't like being a housewife as much. If we're not poor, maybe we can hire some Elizabeth to come once a week to do the general cleaning. David set the empty coffee cup carefully on the table. Well, if you like it, fine. Go ahead. Only I have to tell you something ... that he divorced me. Jennifer laughed. I won't be home from work later. It's now somewhere around 2. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. You got a mistress? More like a part-time job to pay Elizabeth. What kind of part-time job? I can't say. It wasn't exactly legal. Nothing criminal, David replied. Don't sigh. That's scary. Secret semi-legal business, Jennifer said. She stroked his head, reached up and kissed his temple. There's no way around it? No. You trust me? Where would I go? David asked. Is that why you wanted to put the girls in daycare? Were you afraid I'd get violent because you'd help me less? Or were you afraid I'd be jealous? All of them. But you're okay with it. I'll start tomorrow. Don't wait up for me. Go to bed, David said. I hope you're not going to do your business on the weekend? No, he looked at his hand, at his watch. Let's go to bed. We have to get up soon. From then on, David started coming home from work later. He made regular stops at the stores, quietly brought the bags into the kitchen, showered and got under the covers, trying not to wake the kids and Jennifer. No matter how hard Jennifer tried to find out the details of his part-time job, David wouldn't reveal them. All he said was that he was basically doing odd jobs and finishing one man's work for another. David has more experience in this sort of thing than this man. And of course he's not cheating on Jennifer. David promises to tell Jennifer everything when the hack job is over, in about a year. He didn't tell his parents anything either, not even his father, with whom he shared absolutely all his problems and successes. He reacted to his son's silence calmly. I guess that's the way it has to be, he told David and Jennifer. I trust him. And do you trust him? He'll tell me when he sees fit. Jennifer's parents weren't happy with that arrangement, especially Mom. "Customer," she whispered, aggressively shutting the door to the room. "Are you out of your mind? David told you in no uncertain terms that he didn't like you anymore? That you're offended? That he's got a mistress? Or that he's going clubbing?" "Do I look that bad, Mom?" Jennifer smiled. "It's not about looks. Your looks are great. Your figure, your hair, your face. But that's not why men love women. Why?" "For a sassy look and a crooked walk," Mom said. "Why are you laughing? You know I'm right. Where is it? Where, I ask you? You're a good mom, but there's not much woman left in you. Your David sees you as a mom. Lenka, caring, kind, but he didn't marry his mother. He married a young, attractive girl. Mom, I've known David since 6th grade. He's seen things you haven't seen. Remember when I fell in the manure in the country? He pulled me out of it and cleaned me up and helped me wash my clothes. Not you. So what? So what? He loved me. He married me. That's why he loved me. That's why I married him," Jennifer said. Her mother waved her hand. "Do as you please. If he cheats on you, don't come complaining to me." Life went on as usual. Jennifer got used to the new routine and missed her husband. She tried to get up early on weekdays to spend time with her husband at breakfast. She seriously considered going to work. She reasoned, yes, with a job, less time will be spent with the girls, but my husband will have less work, and they will be able to spend time together more often, the 4 of them. Jennifer did not share her thoughts with David. He was still as caring, calm and cheerful as before. His part-time job didn't bore him, but it didn't bring him much joy either. On Fridays, Elizabeth, the aunt Jennifer had dreamed of hiring, came to visit. Jennifer had found her through a cleaning agency. Elizabeth would scrub the tiles in the bathroom, kitchen, scrub the floors and windows, vacuum, clean stains from clothes, walls, and furniture. After her cleaning, the apartment stayed clean until almost the next time she came back. In the meantime, Jennifer was out with Claire and Patricia. They went to the lake to feed the ducks, rode on the swings in the yard, and petted the neighbors' dogs. One day during their walk, Jennifer was approached by a neighbor, Madison. "How are you two doing?" she asked. "Growing up?" Madison gave Jennifer a little hug and a pat on the back. "How are you doing? You're not sick, are you?" "No, thanks. Healthy as an ox," Jennifer said. Madison wanted to say something else, but she didn't. She stood there for a moment, her fist to her mouth. "Listen, Christopher," she began. "How are things with you and David? In what way? Not fighting?" "No, why do you ask?" "No reason," Madison said. "Let's go to the bench and sit down. My legs are killing me. I went for a walk at 1 in the morning last night. My blood pressure spiked, and I needed some air. Be careful." "Yeah, I'm careful. Yeah, I'm careful," Jennifer said. They cleared the bench seats of fallen leaves and sat down where they could see Patricia and Claire playing in the sandbox with the other children. So Madison continued, "I went out for some air, and I saw David coming, and I recognized his car. I thought it was late. He's on his way home." "Yeah, he's working late now. He's got some kind of part-time job," Jennifer said. "A part-time job?" "Well, I guess so," Madison nodded. "And I think he said hello to the neighbor, and he stopped and got out of the car, and I was standing there, under the lilac tree over there. The light of the street lamp wasn't falling. You couldn't see me. Before I could say hello, David's cell phone rang. I wouldn't want to distract the man. He answered it. I figured someone had asked him to buy groceries. He repeated the list. Milk, eggs. I don't remember everything." "I didn't ask," Jennifer said thoughtfully. "Maybe his parents called. Do they often take him shopping at 1 in the morning?" Madison wondered. Jennifer listened to Madison carefully. "Yeah, that's weird," she said. "That's what I thought. That's why I thought I'd tell you. I'm not a gossip. I don't want to say anything. It just surprised me. A man comes home from work and someone calls him and asks him to buy milk. Where would he buy it?" "I don't know," Jennifer said. I'll talk to him today and find out, and I'll tell you. Don't. Madison became agitated. Why do I need your life? It's none of my business. But you get the point. After midnight, as usual, Jennifer waited for her husband in the kitchen. David came in quietly, closed the door, changed his clothes, and came up to her to kiss her. "Hello," he said. "What are you doing up again?" "I told you not to wait for me. I can pour my own tea." Jennifer whispered in his ear, hugging him. "Curiosity is keeping me awake. Madison told me how you were on the phone last night asking for groceries. I asked my parents, and neither of them called you last night." David unclenched Jenny Farina's hands behind his back and pulled away. "And what do you want to know? Who called me?" "Yeah, you promised you wouldn't be jealous of me." "So why am I jealous?" "I'm not jealous," Jennifer said, slumping down on the stool. "I want to know who you buy groceries for at night." "No one. I came home last night after that conversation, and I bought groceries in the evening, as usual." "Who's the groceries for?" Jennifer asked. David leaned on the windowsill, sighed heavily, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Jennifer, I'm really tired. Let's not get jealous right now. I can't tell you who I bought groceries for." "Is that your part-time job, buying groceries?" Jennifer asked, jumping up from her seat and pacing the kitchen from corner to corner, arms crossed. "I thought you were in the office doing reports and estimates, but you're buying milk for someone." David watched her movements in silence for a while. Then he came over and took her by the shoulders. "For a woman," he said, "I don't have another. If that interests you, believe it or not." In the morning, Jennifer caught Madison in the driveway and told her that her husband was buying groceries for his parents. The neighbor exhaled in relief and sincerity. Jennifer didn't talk about her personal life anymore and decided not to tell her mother about her husband buying groceries for someone else. She knew nothing good would come of it. If her mother knew, she would worry, speculate, and question her son-in-law's fidelity. Jennifer decided to devote all her time to New Year's Eve preparations. In the first year of Patricia and Claire's life, they did not have a proper celebration. Because the twins were sick, they didn't go to Jennifer's parents' house. They stayed in their apartment to watch dull TV, give the children medication on schedule, take their temperature, and eat a liver salad bought at the nearest store. We didn't even have a Christmas tree, because we planned to decorate it in the country. So we bought a huge fluffy beauty at the sawmill, one for everyone, David and Jennifer and their parents. On January 1st, David's parents arrived. They brought some food from the New Year's table. They talked and babysat their granddaughters. On January 2nd, Jennifer's parents arrived and did the same thing. They showed pictures from the cottage, the Christmas tree, the huge garland in the yard, meat on the fire, homemade Napoleon. And on the third day, the girls recovered, which was confirmed by David's friend, part-time pediatrician. This year, Jennifer planned a double celebration. She bought her parents a Christmas tree with a wreath of pine needles and garlands. Patricia and Claire looked with interest at the decorations in paper bags waiting in the hallway. They didn't know yet that they would be spending a few days with their grandparents while their parents' sunbathed on the beach. Tickets to Egypt was the gift Jennifer had prepared for David. She got the tickets by chance and by sheer luck. She saw in one of the social networks the drawing of tickets when she was looking at photos of acquaintances with David. She decided to participate and won. It was her first experience of participating in such events and the first victory. Jennifer hadn't said anything to David yet. She wanted to surprise him. She packed the tickets in a beautiful envelope, waiting for the chimes to strike. They were to fly out on January 2nd and stay in Egypt for 3 days, returning before the end of the New Year holidays. Jennifer had warned her and her husband's parents. They happily agreed to look after the children, and with enviable responsibility kept silent, so as not to spoil the surprise. They decided to celebrate New Year's Eve at the cottage. The dacha belonged to Jennifer's parents. They had built it in the Soviet years on a plot of land that they had managed to snatch at a cheap price during the auction. They installed gas and electricity themselves, dug a well. Then came a good house with a log attic, a bathhouse, and fruit trees. Jennifer's mother planted new flowers every year, beautifying the plot. She grew vegetables, cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers in the greenhouse, onions, carrots, and herbs in the beds. Jennifer loved the cottage, and so did David. They both had many memories of childhood, youth, and their honeymoon, most of which they had spent here. The wood paneling of the attic was scrawled with a penknife, David, Jennifer, David, Jennifer, David is a fool, Jennifer is a chicken. Before becoming a couple, David and Jennifer had lived here as friends all summer during school vacations, running to swim at the lake and climbing the apple trees in the orchard. Now the cottage attracted them with its privacy, the familiar smells of the cozy living room, and the woods nearby. It was hard to imagine a better place to celebrate New Year's Eve. David worked until December 30th, so on December 30th they poured hot tea into a thermos, took sandwiches with them, put Patricia and Claire in the back seat, and prepared for a 3-hour journey through traffic and uncleared roads to the accompaniment of children's crying. As soon as they arrived, the children were picked up by their parents and sent David and Jennifer off to bathe in the bathhouse, have lunch and rest after the road. The elders arrived a week early to avoid traffic and clean the house before the guests arrived. On December 31st, the women made salads and the men roasted meat outside. The twins were entrusted to Jennifer. They put them in an old sled, put a blanket underneath, and sent them out for a walk in the winter woods. Jennifer, dressed in her husband's jacket, her father's boots, and her mother-in-law's scarf, pulled the sled by the rope, her head cocked back and gazing at the snow-covered tops of the centuries-old spruce trees. The forest hummed as the wind picked up, piles of snow falling from the branches. Somewhere in the distance, a woodpecker tapped on a trunk. Patricia and Claire slept with their noses red from the frost. Suddenly, the silence of the forest was interrupted by a ringing sound. It was David's cell phone in Jennifer's jacket pocket. She cursed, glancing at the sleepwalking babies. Quickly, she fumbled for the phone and took the call. A certain rental was calling. "Yes," Jennifer said. "Hello? Can you hear me?" There was silence on the other end. "You probably can't hear me," Jennifer concluded. "We're in the woods, and the connection's bad. I'll tell David you called. He'll call you." After listening to the silence for a while, she ended the call. Before putting the phone back in her pocket, she looked at the time. They had been walking for an hour. They needed to get back. When she entered the wicket, carefully holding the sled, David and her father were grilling the last pieces of meat. "Jennifer, did they call you back?" David asked. "Some kind of rental," Jennifer replied. She went into the house, changed her clothes, and put the kids to bed. Now they wouldn't wake up until morning. Elizabeth stayed in the room with Patricia and Claire, sent Jennifer off to get dressed and put on her makeup. Jennifer had brought a long-sleeve silk dress and red lipstick. Her short hair didn't require styling, and she wasn't a big fan of makeup, believing she looked good without it. Her opinion was justified. In her 33 years, she looked the same as she did 10 years ago. Not a single wrinkle appeared on Jennifer's face. During this time, there had been a change with her husband, David. Over the past 10 years, he has turned from a shy and modest guy into a confident man who goes to the gym and watches his diet, wears a status watch, dresses solidly, and looks representative. Next to Jennifer, her husband looked older, and she liked it very much. She liked to feel protected, to feel her husband's trust and her power. She put on her dress and warm socks, twirled around in the mirror, and went downstairs. At the Christmas tree, she saw David, looking like a magazine cover model, in slacks and a dark green sweater with braids. Elizabeth was also stacking presents under the tree. "I'm ready," Jennifer said as she approached her husband. "Jennifer, beautiful," Elizabeth exclaimed theatrically, clutching her heart. "You're so beautiful." "Beautiful," David smiled, putting his arm around her waist. "And we want to put all the presents under the tree and sign them, just like in the good old days. We'll open them after the chimes strike." Jennifer leaned over and put the signed envelope under the tree. Jennifer's mom's voice came from the kitchen. She was calling for her daughter to help her. Jennifer put on an apron, moved a few dishes to the living room table, arranged the slices nicely on plates, and laid out the utensils. It was 3 hours until New Year's Eve. Everyone sat down at the table. The meat, prepared in advance, was heated in the oven. It filled the room with the tart smell of smoke. However, the smell of spruce branches interrupted it. They began to remember the past year, the girl's funny words, the mishap with the purchase of the car, the cat's disappearance and its return, the unsuccessful experiments with Jennifer's father's appearance. Appetizers were rapidly disappearing from the table. Faces grew ruddy, eyes buttery. From the wine Jennifer's mom was drinking, she would leave the kitchen every now and then, only to return with another batch of mashed potatoes or meat. Everyone got up with glasses of champagne and shouts of yay and cheerful clinking of glasses to welcome the new year. Elizabeth went up to the second floor and checked on the girls. They were still asleep, having thrown off the blanket, and were cuddled across the double bed. When Jennifer returned to the family, everyone had moved to the couch, covered in plaid. Elizabeth alone went from the Christmas tree to the couch, giving the recipients gifts: David from Mom, Dad from David, Jennifer from Jennifer. She voiced the signed labels. David from Jennifer. Hang in there, David. He picked up the envelope, showed it to Jennifer, making sure it wasn't divorce papers. I hope so, Jennifer laughed. Worse. David opened the envelope, pulling out the vouchers. Surprise. Jennifer kissed him on the cheek. You and I are going to Egypt for 3 days. Mom and Dad will watch the girls. I've arranged it. Can't you say no? You don't have to go to work. Jennifer won them a month ago. Elizabeth entered. Was it hard not to blab? Say it was hard, the others agreed. David remained silent and twirled the tickets in his hands, frowning. The smile was gone from his face. You don't like it? Jennifer asked. Come on, let's go talk. They went out onto the porch, putting on their parents' felt boots and throwing on their jackets. The tickets were left lying lonely on the couch. David and Jennifer's parents looked at them anxiously, trying to diffuse the situation and make conversation. Jennifer, I can't fly, I have work, David said, his gaze hard. That's very nice of you. I appreciate your efforts. I suggest you go on your own, get away, get some rest. What kind of work? You said you weren't going to the office until the 8th. I'm not going to the office. I need a part-time job. Jennifer bit her lip, trying to hold back her tears. But it wasn't working. She sobbed. What kind of part-time job is it that you can't give up for 3 days? Couldn't you and I go on vacation together? Cheryl interrupted. The last time we went was 4 years ago, before I got pregnant. Don't you want to spend time together without kids and parents like we used to? David wiped her tears with the back of his palm, put on his hoodie, and buttoned up his down jacket. I want to know what kind of part-time work you're doing now, she demanded. Her husband smiled guiltily and shrugged, signaling that he wasn't about to reveal his secrets. Jennifer turned and walked into the house, slamming the door. Her parents sitting in the room flinched in surprise, but she didn't listen to their questions or sympathy. Jennifer took off her felt boots and down jacket and went up to the second floor to the room where her daughters slept. Locking herself in, she threw the tickets on the floor beside the bed. Resting her forehead on her knee, she cried silently, clutching the hair on her temples until it hurt. And when she ran out of tears, she curled up on the floor and fell asleep. In the morning, she was awakened by a barely audible knock on the door. It was David. He had brought breakfast and a warm robe. She didn't speak to him. She woke the girls, combed their hair, dressed them, washed them, and braided their pigtails. I didn't do ponytails, said one of the daughters. David took the children in his arms and carried them to breakfast. The parents were still asleep. Jennifer made the girls porridge, left them to David, and got dressed and went out for a walk. Dawn was breaking in the east. The snow crunched loudly beneath her feet, and frost clung to her eyelashes. This wasn't the kind of holiday Jennifer had envisioned when she'd bought garlands and gift paper. At least my face isn't swollen from the cold, she reassured herself, waving her arms and quickening her steps in an attempt to warm up. Hot broth and sleepy parents were waiting for her at home. The drinks from last night had taken their toll on their vigor and well-being. Lunch passed in silence. After lunch, Jennifer's mother stayed with her in the kitchen washing dishes while the others went sledding. After making sure everyone was gone and the front door was closed, she pounced on her daughter with questions. So what happened yesterday? David didn't like your present? Jennifer nodded grimly. Why? Jennifer's mother asked. I don't know. I mean, how did he not explain it to you? He did. He has a part-time job on the holidays, Jennifer said. Can't you say no? Can't. What kind of part-time job is that? Jennifer's mother threw a plate in the sink. Ask him. Maybe he'll tell you, she said disapprovingly. I knew it. I told you, Jennifer, he'd find a mistress. And here it is. Jennifer didn't listen any further. Her mother tore off her apron and ran into the room. Jennifer heard the children and her father-in-law return from their walk, her husband's cheerful voice telling her something. But she couldn't find the strength to open the door and go down to her family. It seemed as if her life was crumbling before her eyes, and she was powerless to do anything about it. After an hour, she got up, packed her and the girls' things into a suitcase, and called a cab. She hastily said goodbye to her parents, dressed the crying children who didn't want to go anywhere. And before slamming the door behind her, she turned to her husband. If you want to tell me about your part-time job, please come home. Until then, don't show up, Jennifer snarled, nodded to her parents, and closed the door. For 2 days, the three of them lived with Claire and Patricia. Her mother called. David's father called. David himself called. Reassured Jennifer that it was foolish to overreact, to take offense at nothing. Guaranteed her husband's repentance in their summer vacation together. Hinted that spouses are supposed to have some secrets from each other. That the desire to thoroughly know everything about her husband's life is more like a pathology in infantile Jennifer, rather than a fair demand. After those long phone conversations, she was nervous and anxious for a long time, despite her outward calmness, preparing breakfast or lunch for her daughters, participating in their games. But she herself was far away, and everything inside Jennifer cried. She hated her husband for betraying her, and was angry at her relatives because they supported him and not her. She hated herself, accepting for a while the presence of her infantilization. Couldn't find someone to blame, and went in circles in her reasoning. The longer Jennifer thought about what had happened, the less she realized anything. Eventually, Jennifer grew tired of the uncertainty. She called her husband, and without answering his greetings, blurted out, "If I find out you have someone on the side, you won't see the girls again. Agreed?" Silence. The second thing, Jennifer continued, "I'm going out to work. I want to make some money so I feel safe. And 3, since you're not saying anything." "I'm going home," her husband David interrupted. "I'm bringing your presents. My parents gave them to me. I'll be there in 2 hours." He came home as Jennifer was putting Patricia and Claire down for their afternoon nap. He opened the door with his own key, set the bag of his wife's gifts on the kitchen table, put the goodies in the refrigerator. Through the open bedroom door, he stood looking at Jennifer and the children for a while. She was reading a book to them, stroking Claire's head, and Patricia was already snoozing next to her. When Claire fell asleep, Jennifer closed the book, climbed out of bed, and left the room, closing the door. David was sitting on the couch in the living room. "Come here," he said, patting the couch next to him. "Let's have a talk. Or are you still holding a grudge?" "I resent it," Jennifer replied, and sat down on the couch. Her husband's hand rested on her shoulder. She saw the ring on his ring finger and felt tears come to her throat. David pulled her to him, buried his face in her hair. "Jennifer, I'm sorry," he said. "That's what you wanted to hear. I'm an idiot. An asshole. The world's worst husband and father, a freak and a bastard, a scoundrel. But I'm not cheating on you. I'm sorry about that too. When are you going to tell me about your part-time job?" "Soon." "Soon. I already told my parents." "Yeah?" Jennifer rounded her eyes and jumped off the couch. "Humor told me no." "Yeah, your mom said not to tell you. You wouldn't understand." "Why wouldn't I understand?" I wondered. Jennifer stared expectantly. David didn't say anything. "If I asked you to give up this part-time job, who would you choose? Her or me and the girls? Then pick us." "Jennifer, I'm choosing you now." Jennifer sat on the edge of the couch. "No more coming home late, always on time, yes?" "Yes," David nodded. "I'll just post something tomorrow." "And no more part-time jobs," David continued. "But you still won't tell me where you're going tomorrow and why." "I will," he nodded. "June." Jennifer thought for a moment, then nodded and smiled victoriously. She had dinner to make and laundry to do. David ironed shirts and a suit. After dinner and an evening walk, they went to bed in the same bed as before, as if nothing had happened. For the first time in a long time, Jennifer felt at peace. Her mind was quiet and empty. In the morning, after seeing her husband off, she was standing at the stove when the phone rang. Looking at the screen, Jennifer was surprised and delighted at the same time. The caller was an old friend with whom she had once been in the same class. "Hello, Tara," she answered. "It's been so long since we've talked to you." "Hello, Jennifer." Tara's voice hadn't changed a bit from the last time they'd seen each other the year before. "I missed you, so I thought I'd give you a call." "Yeah, I missed you too, but I've been busy with one thing or another. I've been texting you on social media. Did you see it?" Jennifer put the lid on the soup and relaxed on the couch. The conversation was long and happy. We discussed plans for the New Year's holidays, the health and success of the children, their ailments. They agreed to meet over the weekend to introduce the children and have some fun. Tara was almost a year younger than Jennifer. Too petite for her age, she was constantly attacked by her classmates. Things were taken away from her, food was taken from her in the cafeteria, and she was tripped up. Jennifer always defended her friend and fiercely fought back against her abusers. When David came to their class, the three of them became friends. Tara sat in the front alone, turning to David and Jennifer at recess to chat. She'd walk out of school with them, walk them to the gate, then walk in the opposite direction, confident that no snowball would fly at her head while her friends were walking behind her. David and Jennifer's affair, Tara took it calmly, even rejoiced. By this time, she also had a beau, Alex, from 9th grade. The guy was a year younger than Tara, but no one noticed the difference. Next to Tara, even some 5th graders looked more mature and manly. After graduation, Tara and Jennifer's paths diverged somewhat. They began to see each other less often, but often corresponded on social networks. Tara didn't go to university, choosing to work instead of studying. She went into business, making custom gingerbread and cakes because she had always loved to bake. Jennifer was happy about her friend's success and did not judge her choice. At Tara's wedding to Alex 3 years after graduation, Jennifer was a witness on the groom's side. She liked Alex tall, confident, and determined. He was the oldest child in the family and had been used to being an adult since he was a kid. Already after school, he had started reselling and buying cars, and then turned it into a business. It seemed to Jennifer that Alex had all the qualities that David lacked. Looking at her husband's perfect handwriting as he finalized his next project, she sincerely wished he were less obedient and less correct. David didn't share Jennifer's enthusiasm for Alex. He considered him a hustler and discouraged Tharoux from marrying him. However, David's predictions about the imminent divorce did not come true. Chetta lived soul to soul for more than 10 years. They recently celebrated the 8th birthday of their son, Ethan. Jennifer and David were his godparents. Ethan was in 2nd grade and was eager to show off his yearly grades to his kind Aunt Jennifer, as he called her, hoping to receive praise and a gift for his progress. Before Claire and Leo were born, Jennifer had spent a lot of time with her friend and her young son, often dropping by after work with something delicious. Playing with Ethan, giving Tara time to rest and finish things. When Jennifer became a mom herself, she had no time for her friend and her son. All of it was taken up with taking care of her own daughters. During her pregnancy, she and Tara often met for a cup of tea. Tara shared with her her experience of motherhood, gave her advice and answered her questions. They saw each other at Jennifer's discharge from the hospital, and then their communication gradually decreased. Jennifer did not see it as anything terrible or unexpected, considered it a natural process. At Tara, Alex, and Ethan's birthday party, she always called her friend to congratulate her or one of the family members. Tara did the same. Every year, Jennifer was pleased to note that their friendship was as sincere and honest as it had been in high school. One thing that frustrated her was David's attitude toward her friend's husband at all their meetings and get-togethers. This attitude depressed the atmosphere, creating an invisible but palpable tension between the men. No one seemed to notice him except Jennifer. She tried to ask David the reason for his dislike. "Why do you treat Alex like he's stealing your car and reselling it?" Jennifer asked, sitting in front of the dressing table after a shower. David was reading something while lying in bed. He didn't answer right away. "Do you believe you can make an honest living buying cars at 18? I believe that with a bit of entrepreneurial spirit you can. We have different ideas about enterprising people, that's all. Jennifer sighed, climbed under the covers, looked at her husband, who was still reading. Do you think I'm enterprising? You gave birth to twins? He laughed. You bet I did. And no kidding, I've always liked your determination. You changed jobs so easily. I couldn't have done it. Would you like to? David thought about it. No, I guess I'm not as good as you. You're not. It pays well. And you're happy? I bet you are. Jennifer often returned to the thought of why she often felt sorry for her husband and thought of him as an unhappy man mired in envy. It was envy that she attributed to her dislike of Alex. In the end, Alex's independence and freedom from office regulations seemed to her to be reason enough for the family to think of him as a hustler. The Alexes lived quite modestly, a small two-room apartment on the outskirts, one car, which Alex was always taking to the service station to keep it running. Alex had never been in trouble with the law. He did not offend Tara and his son. On the contrary, he always tried to please them. He gave flowers and appliances to his wife, gifts to Ethan. When Jennifer told David that a friend had called and they agreed to meet on the weekend, he was not very happy. Do I have to go? It's Tara. David exclaimed. What are you doing? I haven't seen her in what, 2 years or 3? 3, Jennifer replied. Don't you want to meet her? She changed her color to red. And Ethan's in 2nd grade, can you imagine? I can imagine. Alex will probably be there too. It's a weekend, he's home on weekends. We wanted to meet up. Tara's baking a cake for them. I don't want to go out with him, David said. Why I don't like him? You know why. In the evening, Jennifer called a friend, said that her husband categorically did not want to see Tara's husband. She apologized. Tara, surprisingly, was not upset, even pleased. It turned out that Alex was also not eager to meet David in his own house, and explicitly asked his wife to rid him of such a guest. I thought they'd wise up as they got older, Tara concluded. But I guess it's true that men's childhood at 40 is just beginning. Saturday morning, Jennifer made breakfast. While Patricia and Claire watched a cartoon, David, returning from a run, showered and helped her set the table. Then they had breakfast of oatmeal with cream and sandwiches. Leaving the kids to her husband, Jennifer dressed quickly, put a change of clothes and snacks for the girls, gifts for Tara and Ethan, and a phone charger in her bag. Dressed the kids. David offered them a ride, and Jennifer accepted. There was silence along the way. After waving goodbye to Patricia and Claire, David drove off. Alex, along with Tara, went out to greet the guests. After a welcoming hug, the girls briskly walked up the porch steps, not letting the adults take them in their arms and carry them up the freight elevator. They reached the 7th floor. The Alex's apartment looked the same as it had 3 years ago when everyone had gathered for a celebratory dinner after Ethan's baptism. Except that Ethan's room had been redecorated. The crib was replaced by an adult one, a desk and a shelf for textbooks. There were more toys, too. Patricia and Claire were immediately interested in them. The 3 of them, and Ethan, sat on the carpet and looked at the toy railroad. Sometimes they stopped the train with their hands and attached new cars to it. Tara baked Jennifer, Patricia, and Claire's favorite cake. The aroma of baked goods and honey wafted throughout the house. I wish David could have been here, Jennifer said. He loves honey so much. Tara glanced at her husband as she cut the cake into slices. David, Alex began, scrunching up his nose. We're all adults here. We all understand why David isn't here. There was an awkward pause. Jennifer waved her hand. I don't want to spoil the mood for myself and you. Tara, will you put a piece of this with me and I'll give it to him? I don't want to spoil anyone's mood either, Alex said. Unlike your husband. Alex, why? Tara objected. What's the point of these ceremonies? All of us, I think that David is a little complicated man, with a complicated character, harmful, in short, and too proud. Jennifer thought for a moment. He didn't say why he didn't like you. He said it was because I'm a scoundrel and a bad person, Alex answered. Or what was it? A rascal, he said. When he called you that, I don't remember, Tara said. At our wedding you weren't around. Did you go to the restroom? Alex laughed. He said, I don't approve of your choice, but I support you. You're not a bad guy, Alex. You're kind of smart, but your business is murky. What worries me is that you're a crook, Alex. You're a crook. Tara, don't ever forget that. What an attachment. Jennifer took a few sips of her tea. I don't understand. Maybe there's something we don't know with you. Did you nail someone or something? Or what? Tara placed a saucer with a piece of cake in front of her. Yes, Alex. Are you a criminal mastermind by any chance? I've never hurt anyone in my entire life. So far, Alex answered. Although the desire arises often. People often try to cheat when buying or selling cars. Thank you, sweetheart, Alex said, taking the saucer from Tara's hands. But I've never even once cheated anyone. Although there was such a desire, I admit. Sometimes I want to give people the same treatment they give me. Don't take offense to David, Jennifer interjected. Don't take offense to me. Okay, how can you be offended by your friends? Alex waved his hands. Then they gave the children tea with honey. We decided to go out and walk a little to the nearest park so that Claire and Patricia wouldn't get tired on the way. They were put in Ethan's sled. Eitan himself ran ahead, showing his neighborhood. And here is the school where I go to school. And here's the store. And here's the skating rink. He shouted. In his hands, Ethan held a soft toy, a gift from Jennifer Tier. She had given Tara and Alex a porcelain vase of flowers, and Alex a soft horsehide purse. Tara lamented for a long time that she was a bad friend and a terrible person because she had forgotten about the gifts for Jennifer and her children. On the way to the park, she tried to think of what to get. What about a cake, Jennifer? She finally asked as they entered the tall wrought iron gate. And gingerbread, Claire said. I want gingerbread, like on the Christmas tree. In the park, they had built an ice rink for New Year's Eve. The children ran through the maze under Eitan's guidance, laughing with laughter from the running and the frost. Their cheeks were scarlet, and their eyes glistened with happiness. Alex stood, hugging Thera from behind and watching the children, occasionally intervening in the women's dialogue. Jennifer thought for a long time whether to tell her friend about her husband's strange part-time job during the holidays and her parents' reaction to what had happened. In the end, she decided to share her worries. I still don't know if I did the right thing. Jennifer finished her story. I don't know what it was. It was idiotic. He never told you what the part-time job was? Yes, Alex said thoughtfully. No, David answered. He said he'd tell me later. He couldn't right now, supposedly. That's a strange story, said Tara. My parents aren't talking either, keeping a secret, like partisans. Jennifer sighed. I still can't communicate with them properly after all this. How do I treat them? As liars or as people who behave reasonably, unlike me? Tara released herself from her husband's embrace, walked over to Jennifer and took her hand. Jennifer, it seems to me that if he was supporting a second wife and children, the parents would have told you. It's not like they're immoral people. Jennifer smiled. And really, I doubt my mom would have let him live peacefully on this earth after learning of his betrayal or infidelity. He's probably taking care of his grandmother or grandfather, Tara continued. You know he always stands up for the weak. Remember how you two defended me at school before Alex showed up? Claire came running up, out of breath and tired. I'm hungry. We decided to warm up at a nearby cafe with a children's area. They ordered mashed potatoes with chicken cutlets for the kids and hot pumpkin soup with cheese toast for themselves. When the Eitan twins got off their plates, they were taken away by animators so the adults could have a chance to sit quietly. Tara talked about all their family trips to Peru, Argentina, Italy, Sardinia. Jennifer listened with mild envy. She, too, loved traveling, hiking through new towns, getting to know the locals. Her suitcase was decorated with souvenir labels and stickers from Brazil, Sweden, Norway, Belgium. David was not such an avid traveler. He often flew on business trips for work. He had a poor tolerance for flights, so he associated traveling exclusively with something obligatory and unpleasant. Whereas Jennifer's greatest pleasure in her youth was to change her place of residence, David valued stability and routine above all else. After Claire and Patricia were born, their family travels were limited to Florida resorts. They rented a house by the sea or in the mountains for 2 weeks with a pool and a small garden, with a hostess who cooked the meals, or at least a family restaurant nearby. It was a kind of compromise between the comforts of home, a familiar lifestyle, and traveling. David had the privacy to negotiate, go jogging, and get a good night's sleep. Jennifer had a break from domestic duties. In the evenings, we all explored the neighborhood together, hiking trails, riding horses and chairlifts, watching the sunset, buying fruit, getting to know and chatting with the locals. Jennifer enjoyed going on these family mini vacations, but really missed her independence and former penchant for adventure. She chased the resentment away by reminiscing about what a wonderful husband and children she had, and how much she loved them. I remember when I quit my job, when I wanted to be a housewife and devote all my time to my family. When I asked David to take over the family, Jennifer said nostalgically, listening to her friends' stories, "I think when the girls grow up and go to school, I'll go to work and we'll travel like we used to. I want to show them the world and remind myself that there is a world beyond our neighborhood." Jennifer called for the waiter. "We should go home. My girls are about to fall asleep." Alex paid the bill. Everyone got dressed and stood around the porch waiting for David. He was supposed to pick up Jennifer and the kids. From far away, they saw a car approaching. Alex and Tara said goodbye to Jennifer. David pulled into the parking lot beside them, turned off the engine, and got out to put Claire and Patricia in. "Hi, Tara." He hugged his friend and extended his hand to Alex. "Hi, who's this guy? Grown up, serious. Is it Ethan?" "Hey man, how's it going?" He listened to Ethan's short story about boxing, shook his hand, praised his courage. After sitting the yawning children down, he helped Jennifer sit down and closed the door. He turned around in passing. "Will we get together sometime? Sit down again?" "Sure," Tara nodded. The car was warm from the heater on the way home. David turned to Jennifer. "How's Tara doing? What's new?" Jennifer briefly recounted the highlights of Alex's family life. She didn't discuss the odd part-time job, the blown trip, or her relationship with Alex. David nodded contentedly. "Tara looks good. Ethan's grown up. Alex is doing well at work," Jennifer said. "Why are you so interested in his progress all of a sudden?" David sneered. "He's not worthy of such attention, is he? Didn't my attitude toward him bother you before? What's changed?" Jennifer thought for a moment. "I used to make excuses for you, allow the idea that you were right about him to some extent. And now I make excuses for him because you seem like a big leaguer." David laughed. "Well, what have you descended to?" They never spoke again. They drove the rest of the way in silence. As she lay down to sleep on the bed beside her husband, Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling of squeamishness mixed with anxiety. David seemed like a stranger after meeting Tara and talking to Alex. She was uncomfortable being so close to him. She felt embarrassed and defenseless at the same time. She was overcome with a maddening sadness. She didn't want to ruin what she had spent years building, to feel her loved one drifting away and becoming a stranger. I wanted to cry. Instead, Jennifer pulled the blanket up higher, lying on her side, and bit her lip. New Year's vacation was over. Life was back to the same old, troubled routine. David went to work. Jennifer took care of the house. He would bring in the groceries on her list and be home by 8 o'clock at night. She would make him breakfast, walk him out, and greet him. While her husband was away, she would tutor the children. They read, molded, glued, cut, and played. They often went to playgrounds and generally tried to be around other children for longer periods of time. Jennifer wanted to prepare Claire and Patricia for kindergarten so that it wouldn't be a shock for them to be separated from their mom. While the girls slept in the afternoon after a walk and lunch, she researched private daycare centers on the internet, their locations, rates, and reviews. She found a couple of suitable ones and showed them to David. He approved of both, but liked the one that was closer. The grandparents came on weekends, bringing jars of homemade pickles and jam and toys for the children. We didn't go to the dacha anymore. It was too far and exhausting to get to work. Neither of them brought up the subject of part-time work in their quarrel. and the spouses themselves did not discuss the events of the last few days, even among themselves. Everything seemed to be back to normal, but Jennifer felt a strange sense of unreality. Her life seemed to her a movie or a circus performance, and people in it actors. She thought of herself as an actress, and a very good one at that. Every morning, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, she stared at her reflection for a long time. Her gaze was cold and hard, as if it had faded. The thought of Claire and Patricia seeing that look when they woke up in the morning made her want to drink. It's not the kids' fault, Jennifer decided. She put on her sweetest smile and the look of a loving mother before leaving the bathroom and going to wake the girls. Her parents and David noticed the change in Jennifer, asking, "What's wrong with you? Why are you so tired? Are you sick?" Jennifer waved it off. "I'm fine." It was a lie. She was sick. In March, Claire and Patricia started kindergarten. David dropped them off in the morning and Jennifer took them home in the afternoon. After a few weeks, the girls got used to the teachers and their group, started staying full-time and coming home later with their father. Jennifer got a job as an engineer at one of the firms where she had worked long ago before her maternity leave. They accepted her reluctantly because of her young children, worried that she would take frequent time off and sick leave. But Jennifer wasn't too worried about that, as she was looking forward to a new chapter in her life. She walked to work 2 stops on the bus, subway 30 minutes away. It was only an hour-and-a-half commute to get to work in time for the 9 a.m. start of the day. Jennifer left the house at 8:30 before her husband. So David would collect the girls and Jennifer would prepare their clothes in advance and hang them on the chairs. Claire and Patricia had breakfast at the nursery. Jennifer and David were in the office. They each prepared their own food in containers of scrambled eggs, sandwiches, porridge. They began to see and talk less often. Jennifer was glad of that. The less often she had to play the role of happy wife, the happier she felt. Sitting at the same table, she looked at him distantly as a guest and began to notice the small imperfections on his face, the wrinkles, the gray color of his skin. Jennifer looked forward to the summer and the long-awaited trip in the hope that she would be able to fall in love with her husband again, to regain the trust and intimacy she had lost. On May holidays, she wanted to go to the cottage with her parents and children. It was necessary to clean up the garden, make beds. Jennifer hoped that there would be an opportunity to talk to her husband alone, entrusting the children to their grandmothers, to discuss their relationship, to share their thoughts. After all, she thought, we can cry and separate. It's better than trying to live on the ashes of a relationship. To the surprise of her parents and David's parents, he refused to go to the cottage, citing ill health. "It's the heat," Jennifer's mother sighed into the phone. "I can't stand the heat, especially on the road." David himself said that during the May holidays he would be traveling to another city. In response to Jennifer's reasonable question about the permissibility and legitimacy of the management's decision to deprive employees of their legitimate days off, he replied, "There are several residents in a house there who suffered carbon monoxide poisoning due to a ventilation design error. We need to go and collect evidence of our innocence. You know how such cases are solved nowadays. They'll blame it on us and put innocent people in jail." Jennifer agreed and didn't object. But after she and Claire and Patricia had seen David off, standing on the porch and waving at the car as it drove away, she had an idea. "Girls, why don't you and I go to the cottage ourselves? It's cool, it's fresh, shade from the trees. They're probably already swimming in the river, aren't they?" She spent the evening thinking, and in the morning she packed a snack and called a cab. The ride was quick. The cab driver was pleased. "You're lucky you didn't go yesterday. There was such a traffic collapse on the roads, traffic jams in both directions. Everyone was going to their summer homes." As if they didn't know that they weren't the only smart ones, that the whole city would be leaving in the evening, and in the morning it would be a pleasure to drive on a free road, he said. Jennifer nodded and closed her eyes, putting her face in the cool breeze from the open window. The cab driver helped unload things out of the trunk and get the tired children out of their seats. After receiving his thanks and payment, he drove off, honking goodbye. Jennifer, Patricia, and Claire entered the yard. As they walked up to the porch, they looked for the key under a large concrete planter, and to their surprise, they didn't find it. So Jennifer muttered, "Grandma Samantha or your grandfather has hidden the key somewhere. We should call them." Jennifer's mother didn't pick up the phone for a long time, but on the second attempt she did. "Yes, Jennifer, hi Mom. Are you guys asleep?" "We just woke up," came a voice. "We slept for a few hours before the heat wave. My blood pressure spiked last night. How are you?" "We're at the cottage with the girls. We're at the cottage. I can't find the key. Where did you hide it?" There was silence. "Grandma Samantha, can you hear us?" Jennifer asked. "What are you doing out there?" "We came for a swim," she said uncertainly. She didn't want to be cooped up in the heat. "It's nice here." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Why? I know you wouldn't have come with us, that you were all sick." Jennifer couldn't take it anymore. "Tell me where the keys are, please. I really have to go to the bathroom. I'll call you back later and talk to you if you want." "There's no key," said the mother. "We have to knock and call. You don't have to break it." Jennifer frowned. She walked to the door and knocked. She turned back to Claire and Patricia, who were looking at the dandelions. Footsteps were heard. Someone put on slippers and came to the door. "Is that you?" Jennifer heard a familiar voice. The door lock clicked. David, sleepy, covered his eyes with the palm of his hand against the bright sunlight. "Jennifer?" His voice was full of bewilderment. She looked incomprehensively at her husband, and he at her. Patricia and Claire ran up to David, hugging his legs. "Hi, Daddy. Hi, Daddy," they exclaimed. In the back of the living room, behind David on the couch, Jennifer noticed some movement. Her eyes bloodshot, her hands clenched into fists. Pushing her husband aside, without removing her shoes, she walked with a firm, determined gait to the couch and yanked the blanket from whoever was hiding under it. She saw a boy of about 4 years of age. "Daddy," the boy called out, crying. He stood up on the couch and reached out his hand to Jennifer, holding onto the headboard with the other. Patricia and Claire splayed their arms and hid behind their father. He walked over to the boy, taking him in his arms. He said softly, kissed him on the top of his head, and held him close. "Who is it?" Jennifer asked quietly, unable to feel her own lips. "I'll explain in a moment," David replied. "Who is it, David? Why don't you say something?" "It's your son," he said. "Dad," the boy said, staring at Jennifer with weeping eyes. It was Patricia and Claire's turn to cry after the strange child called their daddy twice. "I'll explain everything. Just calm down." First, David pointed his gaze at the children. On unsteady legs, Jennifer walked over to the girls, knelt down in front of them, hugged them, and wiped the tears from their cheeks. "It's okay," she repeated, not realizing she was crying herself. When the children's crying stopped, they took everyone into the kitchen, poured tea, put cereal on plates, and sat down at the table. Jennifer did everything in a fog. She broke a cup, cut her finger. When she finally sank into a chair, she realized how tired she was, how much she wanted to sleep and wander somewhere quiet. "Who is it?" She repeated the question she had asked earlier. "This is John," David answered, biting into an apple. "Alex's son." Jennifer's eyes nearly fell out of her orbits. "What, shush?" David took her hand in his. "You scare the kids, they'll start crying again. That's Alex's son. Tara doesn't know about him." "How does he have a son? Was he cheating?" She realized from the meaningful look in her husband's eyes how stupid that question sounded. He was cheating, which means he didn't tell Tara or me, Jennifer concluded. David took another bite of his apple. "Why? His aunt, his mother's sister, is going to take him soon. She's in the process of getting custody." "What about his mother?" Jennifer asked. Ceased. They were hit by a truck while crossing the road with a friend. Last fall, Alex got a call from the hospital telling him everything. They found his number in his mother's cell phone. David put the apple aside. He was listed as John's dad and his name was on the certificate. Only Alex didn't want to take John in. "So I took his son so as not to destroy Tara's family." Jennifer grinned and pulled her hand out. Sounds very plausible. Do you think you're lying to me? Yes? Then I'll tell you my version. She bit her lip. It's your son, the one you've been hiding from me. And now you're trying to come up with some ridiculous excuse. And you got your parents involved. Jesus, who was looking after him? Your mom, my mom, all of them. He was with a babysitter, David said. And you want to call Alex? He grinned wickedly. Let him tell him how he wanted to put his son in an orphanage. Latent tears rolled down Jennifer's cheeks, her throat dry. She left the table with the phone in her hands, walked across the yard, found a shade under a tree, and sat down on the grass. Dialed Alex's number. She waited with indescribable horror for the dial tone to change to his voice. Yes? Alex answered. Alex, hi. It's Jennifer. Did you find out why you're calling so early? Tara's here. Tara's at home with the kids. I went to get some water. Alex, is it true? Jennifer's voice trembled. Do you have a son? What son? He muttered. John. His mother died in the fall. The hospital called you, asked you to come over. I don't know any. Alex cut him off and hung up. Jennifer remained sitting on the ground with her cell phone in her hands, listening to the occasional bird trills in the apple blossoms above her and the dense buzzing of bees. After a few minutes, Alex called back. Well, how could you cheat on her? Jennifer asked, confused. She breathes you. She'd be devastated if she found out. That's why I'm not saying a word, Alex said. Is your son healthy? Cheryl began after a short pause. He's eating cereal. I'm drunk, Alex said angrily. We were celebrating a wholesale shipment to Chicago. Went to a bar, had a drink. I don't remember the rest of it. I woke up at her place. The poor thing ran through Jennifer's mind. But she held back the urge to sarcasm. She wanted to clear up the situation before the end, without any unnecessary scenes. Did you want to put your son in an orphanage, like David said? She asked after a silence. Jennifer, Alex began, choosing his words. You're not stupid, are you? What was I supposed to do? Bring him home, say, here, Tara, this is my son from another woman. He's going to live with us now? Is that it? David was wrong to get involved in this. My guys would have given him a hard time. He can't keep his mouth shut. Jennifer couldn't find anything to say. The only phrase in her head was, oh my God, oh my God. Alex shouted something into the phone for a long time, but she didn't listen to him, slowly lowered her hand with the phone, put it down beside her, and lay on her back. The wood stabbed, tickling her neck. Jennifer smiled. So what, you're not cheating on your wife? Chick. But can you call him a good man? Is it good to deceive Thera and hide the truth from her, she thought. She reluctantly got up, picked up her cell phone, and walked into the house. Patricia, Claire, and John were sitting on the carpet in front of the TV watching some cartoon. David was sitting with them. When he saw Jennifer, he headed into the kitchen with the empty milk glasses and with a nod of his head beckoned her to follow, loading the dirty dishes into the sink. Everything's soaked. Everybody's fed, everybody's happy, David said. They'll take them to the river after lunch. Jennifer pressed her back against the wall. Her knees trembled. We have to tell Tara, David. It's not right. He looked at his wife in surprise. Are you afraid of upsetting her? I'm afraid of betraying her. Covering up this infidelity, the child, is a betrayal. David ran the dishes in the sink, washed them, wiped his hands, and stood across from her, pulling his cell phone out of his pocket. If you want, I'll tell Tara everything, David said. Honestly, my tongue itched. I'll stop you myself, Jennifer replied. I'll tell her myself. I'll go into town tomorrow, meet her, prepare her somehow. How can you prepare for something like this? David frowned. It's better to invite her here. Do you think Alex will let me go? Jennifer's face stretched into a grin. He's leaving today. I asked Elizabeth not to tell him where I was going. Tell him David thought of something in his mind. Tell him it's necessary, that it's a surprise. For lunch, Jennifer made buttermilk dip. While she was cutting vegetables and chicken meat, She mentally imagined the conversation with her friend and the forthcoming explanations, choosing words. During lunch, she was silent and aloof for the same reason. She reacted to her daughter's appeals with a strained, guilty smile. After lunch, David put all the children in a garden wheelbarrow, threw an old blanket in the bottom of it, hung a towel around their necks, and took them to the river. Jennifer closed the wicket behind them, went back under her apple tree, dialed Thera. She answered almost immediately. "Jennifer, hi. If you want to call us out, we're just about to go to our swamp in the park, aka by the lake. Come join us." Jennifer laughed. "Beauty and your swamp. Call a cab. I'm taking you to my parents' summer house. The same one where we had our first vodka in 11th grade. "I'm on my way," Tara replied. Only Jennifer lowered her voice. "Don't tell Alex you're coming here and that you're meeting me." "Why?" Tara was confused. "That's the way it has to be. There's a surprise waiting for you that he doesn't want to show you." Tara mumbled something in her pleasant voice and promised to keep the secret. 2 hours later, Jennifer heard the creaking of gravel near the gate. She had spent the whole time lying on the grass and, as it seemed to her, had gained strength for the final act of the play in which she had been participating against her will for months. Patricia and Claire and David returned from the river, wet and happy. John was with them, too. By the time Thera arrived at their house, they were sitting on the rug, now drawing something on sheets of paper scattered on the floor. Jennifer met Tara's friend, hugged her, took her under her arm and led her into the house. "Where's Ethan going?" "He didn't want to go. He was meeting some friends," Jennifer said. "I asked my mother to watch him. She'd just run out for a visit." Tara stopped, pulled a bottle of burgundy liquid out of her bag, handed it to Jennifer. "I don't drink," "She doesn't drink," Jennifer remarked. "Alex left for 3 days in Chicago. Who'd you bring it to?" "I guess it was fate that you invited me," replied Tara. They went into the house. Tara said hello to David and turned to John. "What are you?" "Lucky neighbor," John replied, staring at Tara silently. "Let's go get a drink," Cheryl called out to her husband. Tara put the bottle on the table. "Brought Mom's specialty." As she sat down at the table and sipped the tincture, Tara remembered her question. "So, who's the boy?" Alex's son, Jennifer exhaled without hesitation. Cheryl looked understandingly first at her, then at David. Their eyes narrowed under that gaze and looked down at the floor. "Alex's son? Alex cheated on you?" Tara asked. "A few years ago when he went on a business trip to Seattle. John was born. That's his name," Jennifer replied. She felt David take her hand. "His mother died in the fall. The woman's relatives couldn't be found, but the police found Alex's number in her phone. He came over and wrote a waiver, told his friends. They contacted me. I talked Alex into taking John. Found a nanny, paid for the upkeep. Now there's a good woman. Soon she'll adopt him and all this will be over." "Is this some kind of joke?" Tara interrupted her. "If this is a joke, it's not funny, guys." "It's not a joke," David entered the conversation. "That's what happened. I'll call Alex. He'll confirm it." The shot glass slipped from Tara's weakened hand. She leaned back in her chair and looked Jennifer in the eye, the corner of her lips twitching like a flag in the wind. She could see that tears were coming to her throat, that Tara was about to burst into tears. "And you've been lying to me for almost a year," she said. "Jennifer didn't find out until today. And I lied. Why? I didn't want to hurt you. And then today, all of a sudden I did. Jennifer changed my mind. She thinks it's wrong to keep the truth from you, that it's a betrayal," David said. "It is," Tara blurted out. Tears sprang from her eyes. "You're a traitor, David." She cried. At first it was only occasional quiet sobs. Then Tara fell face down on the table, covered her head with her hands and sobbed, shaking her whole body. David closed the door to the living room. Jennifer moved a chair over. She hugged her friend with one arm and stroked her head with the other. She told her husband to go to the children. And when he came out, Jennifer buried her nose in Tara's shoulder, crying with her. With each tear shed, it became easier and easier to breathe. Half an hour later, both were sitting on the kitchen floor, their cheeks in tears. A half-empty bottle of tincture stood on the carpet between them. Jennifer looked happy and elated. Tara, on the other hand, looked devastated. Good mother. Jennifer smiled. She got drunk in the middle of the day, Tara, and threw it away. How am I supposed to look him in the eye? What am I supposed to say to him? Oh my God. When you talk to your husband, said Tara. And you, Jennifer, you're smiling. I wanted to apologize to him first. But no. A lie to save him is a lie. Let him thank me for not nailing him with a rolling pin. I think I'm ready to hit Alex with a rolling pin. Swing it around and beat him lying down until I'm tired. We were worried about you, but now I'm more worried about your Alex. Jennifer poured a refill of the tincture and laughed. In the evening, Tara met John, sat him on her lap, and told him something long. John listened and nodded. Are you that good? Tara exclaimed loudly, kissing John on the top of his head. You're going to be okay. I will. After seeing Tara off, Jennifer made the bed and put the children Claire, Patricia, and John to bed in the attic room. They fell fast asleep after a long day. David prepared dinner tuna salad and leftover tincture. Dinner was eaten on the rug. Jennifer snuggled against his side, resting her head on his shoulder. I'm so tired, David, she said. Let's go to bed, David said. That's not what I meant. Not about sleep, Jennifer replied. She jabbed her index finger at David's solar plexus and his forehead. Tired here and here. Jennifer felt warm breath on her forehead and a weightless kiss. I'm sorry, David said. I won't forgive you for this circus. No forgiveness for you. And I'll give my parents a beating when I get back. I won't care about their blood pressure or their aches and pains, Jennifer said. She grinned. I'll make you beg for forgiveness. How about a divorce? I'll put my parents in a nursing home. And seriously? Jennifer paused to think. Seriously, I don't have the energy to think about it. I don't know how we can regain trust between us and build on what's left. I don't think it's possible. I'll be jealous and suspicious of you for the rest of my life. I'd rather get a divorce. David was silent for a while, sighed heavily. I wanted the best, but it turned out the same as always, he said. Why did you refuse to come with me then? Jennifer woke up. What could have happened in 3 days of vacation with John? Explain why you're here now. He cried, refused to eat, hid from the nanny, afraid of her, begged to go home. I'd come over, he'd calm down, that's all. When you said you were doing someone else's job because you were doing a better job, she wasn't talking about Alex? Jennifer asked. About everyone, David answered. The leaves rustled through the open living room window. It was starting to rain in the garden, and the wind was lifting the tulle, filling the room with coolness and freeing her head from her thoughts. Jennifer felt a sudden lightness, pulled herself up and stood up, wanting to finish the conversation soon and go to bed. This, David, is what I want to tell you next time. If you decide to save the baby, bring him to my house. I feel like a bad woman. Terrible. They stayed at the cottage for a week. They bought groceries at the local store, and from the grandmothers in the neighborhood, fresh eggs and milk. They started the day with a walk together in the morning and finished it in the evening with the same walk. Jennifer developed freckles on her nose and shoulders. David learned to chop wood and stoked the bathhouse. Claire brought a kitten from somewhere and shared it with Patricia all the time. They named him Leo and put him in the hallway. Patricia brought him milk in a bowl every morning. Claire's cat food. John didn't participate in the cat sharing. He preferred to sit on David's lap, digging with him in the vegetable garden, watching cartoons. Jennifer was not jealous of her husband, admitted that John needed protection and attention, but could not bring herself to believe that it was right and natural to have a third, alien child in their family. She looked forward to the arrival of Christopher and Aunt Elizabeth. Elizabeth arrived on May 8th. She was a tall, slender woman of about 35 with a high forehead and large, hot palms. Seeing her, Jennifer thought, this is what a mother should look like. John didn't know Elizabeth. He looked at her warily at first, but when he saw the pearl pendant around her neck, he glowed. Like Mommy's, he said in his childish language. Yes, that's right, Mama had one just like it. Elizabeth had a court date ahead of her where Alex would give up John and Elizabeth would become the legal guardian. They would now live together. Elizabeth rented a hotel room for the duration of the proceedings. Then John would go to San Francisco, where Elizabeth had a house, a husband, and a cat. We always wanted a child, Elizabeth confessed. It never worked out. We thought we'd sinned or done something wrong. But now I look at John and realize how well God has it all worked out. Jennifer had no doubt that everything would go smoothly. Elizabeth had called Tara the day before she arrived, promising not to talk to her husband until John was in good hands. She didn't want to rely on Alex's moods, and his idea of morality, from Jennifer's point of view, left much to be desired. She was immensely proud of her friend, who had turned into a strong, wise woman. After returning home, Jennifer called Tara to encourage her and arranged to meet her for the weekend. Tara answered in her normal voice. From her words, Jennifer realized that Alex, afraid of the proceedings and scandals, had decided to prolong his absence, which he had informed his wife the day before. I hope he doesn't show up before the trial, David said. Then he wouldn't have to lie. On the day of the trial, Jennifer took the subway to work, as usual. For a long time, she couldn't concentrate on the laptop screen. During the briefing, she chewed on her thumbnail. She was distracted for a long time, and looking at one point, she was ashamed of her absent-mindedness. She sincerely found no objective reason to worry about the fate of someone else's child. All the more reason to worry about nothing. Jennifer kept glancing at her watch. At 4 p.m., a notification appeared on her cell phone screen. I wrote to Elizabeth, "Everything is fine. John is with me. I'm so happy." In the evening, their apartment was going round and round. David arrived in the evening, bringing wine and appetizers. David's parents came to visit. Mom brought her signature fish pie. Not particularly caring about the comfort of the neighbors, they put jazz on the speakers, danced for a long time, hugging and joking. After the arrival of the police officer, they turned off the jazz, exhaled, put the children to bed, sat on the sofa, discussing the latest news. "Mom, I'm still offended by you." "Mom, I'm still offended." "Until you give me the recipe for the pie," Cheryl said. "You're a career woman again." David smiled. "Daughter, you won't have time to bake pies." "Leave that to us old folks," replied Dad. Speaking of which, Cheryl said cryptically, "I want to quit. Don't look at me like that. It's true. I took the job to get away from the mess you made. But now there's no mess, and frankly, I don't want to work." Everybody laughed. They sat up late into the night, as in those distant times, it seemed to Jennifer, when her life had flowed smoothly and clearly. She was very glad to be home again, in a warm bed, in this apartment, surrounded by people dear to her heart, not causing distrust, seeing David off with his parents. At the third hour of the night, closing the door, complained to each other about tomorrow's workday. 2 weeks of freedom, Jennifer boasted, wrapping her arms around her husband's neck. He kissed her for the first time in almost 6 months. He stared into her brown eyes for a long time. Gently taking her in his arms, he carried her to the bedroom. "What's the point of going to bed tonight?" he said, closing the door with his foot. At work, Jennifer was in the clouds with a blissful smile on her face. People who worked in the same office with her looked at Jennifer with bewilderment, trying to understand what this woman, who had worked so hard to get a place in the company and now had submitted her resignation letter and was sleeping on the job, wanted to achieve. She was awakened by a phone call. It was Tara. "You're at work. Can you speak freely?" she asked. "I'm at work, but I can talk," Jennifer replied. Well, Tara sighed. "He arrived today. I packed my stuff, put my bag on the doorstep. He bumped into her when he came in, started yelling from the doorstep, 'You'll be sorry. I'll take your child away from you. You don't even have a real job.'" Jennifer's heart sank as she pictured the scene. "Are you okay?" she asked. "My parents kicked him out with the gifts he brought. My dad remembered his car, which Alex took and wrecked. Gone, basically," Tara exclaimed. "Jennifer. He's gone." Jennifer listened to Tara cry for a minute. "I'm sorry, he turned out to be a fraud," she said at last. Tara laughed through her tears. Fraud is my favorite word. You know, Jen, if mine's a cheater, what's yours? A daddy for hire. Jennifer smiled.